Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at Dark Harry. Today's narrative adventure is titled What If Harry Invited Cousin ITT to the Yule Ball and Hogwarts Lost Its Mind? Funniest timeline. We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1. The cousin from America. Harry slammed his Transfiguration textbook shut with more force than necessary, earning a sharp look from Madame Pants across the library. He mouthed, "Sorry," before turning back to Ron and Hermione. "This is mental," Harry whispered. "Absolutely mental. Facing a dragon was easier than finding a date to this stupid ball." Ron snorted. "Tell me about it. At least with the dragon, you just had to not die. This requires actual talking to girls." Hermione rolled her eyes. "It's not that complicated. You just ask someone you'd enjoy spending the evening with." "Easy for you to say," Harry muttered. "You've already got a date, haven't you?" A blush crept across Hermione's cheeks. "That's not relevant to the current discussion." "She has." Ron nearly shouted, earning another glare from Madame Pants. "Who is it then? Come on, spill." "I don't have to tell you that," Hermione sniffed, gathering her books. "And if you two spent half as much energy actually asking girls as you do complaining about it, you'd both have dates by now." She marched out of the library, leaving Harry and Ron staring after her. "She definitely has a date," Ron said glumly. "Probably Crumb. Have you seen how he lurks around watching her study?" Harry wasn't listening. His mind was still stuck on the humiliating scene from yesterday when he'd finally worked up the courage to ask Cho-chan, only to learn she was already going with Cedric. Perfect, handsome, Triwizard Champion Cedric. "I asked Cho," Harry admitted. "She's going with Diggory." Ron winced. "Tough break, mate. But you've still got options. What about one of the Patil twins? Or maybe, Potter. Weasley." Professor McGonagall's voice cut through their conversation as she approached their table. "I trust you two have secured partners for the Yule Ball. As a champion, Potter, you absolutely must have a date for the opening dance." Harry felt his stomach drop. "I'm working on it, Professor." McGonagall's lips thinned. "The ball is in 3 days, Potter. I suggest you work faster." She swept away, leaving Harry feeling even worse. 3 days, Harry groaned, dropping his head onto the table. "I'm doomed." "You know what?" Ron stood up suddenly. "Let's call it a day. We're not getting anywhere here. Maybe inspiration will strike if we're not trying so hard." Harry nodded and packed up his things. As they trudged back to Gryffindor Tower, his mind raced through every unattached girl in their year, then the years above and below. Everyone seemed to be paired off already. The common room was bustling when they arrived. Fred and George were demonstrating some new prank product that turned people's hair different colors when they ate certain sweets. Neville was practicing dance steps in the corner with a mortified-looking Ginny, and Seamus was loudly proclaiming his success in asking Lavender Brown to the ball. "I'm going upstairs," Harry said to Ron. "Maybe I'll just fake being sick for the ball." "Champions can't skip," Ron reminded him. "McGonagall would drag you there even if you had dragonpox." Harry climbed the stairs to their dormitory, which was mercifully empty. He flopped onto his bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of expectation crushing him. First the tournament, now this stupid ball. Why couldn't he just have a normal year at Hogwarts for once? Rolling onto his side, he noticed the corner of a photo album sticking out from his trunk. It was the album Hagrid had given him in first year, filled with pictures of his parents. He pulled it out, thinking that maybe looking at happier times might improve his mood. As he flipped through the pages of smiling, waving figures, a photo slipped out from between 2 pages and fell onto his bed. Harry frowned. He'd looked through this album dozens of times and didn't remember this picture. He picked it up. It showed his parents at what looked like a very strange party. His mother was laughing, her red hair gleaming, while his father had his arm around a tall, gaunt man in a pinstriped suit. Next to them stood the most peculiar woman Harry had ever seen, pale as moonlight with long black hair and a dress that seemed designed for a funeral. But what really caught Harry's eye was the small figure between the strange couple, a walking pile of hair. Just hair. No visible face, no body, just hair from top to bottom, wearing tiny sunglasses and a bowler hat. Harry flipped the photo over. Written on the back in his mother's neat handwriting, James, Lily, Gomez, Morticia, and cousin ITT, American branch of Potter family through Charles Potter's sister who married into the Addams clan. Halloween 1979. American relatives. Harry whispered. He'd never known he had family in America, let alone such distinctive-looking ones. He stared at the photo again. His parents looked genuinely happy with these strange people. The walking hair creature, cousin ITT, apparently, was holding what looked like a tiny glass of something amber-colored, somehow managing to drink it despite having no visible mouth. Weird, Harry muttered, but he couldn't stop staring at the photo. Family. More family he'd never known about. The door banged open, and Harry quickly shoved the photo into his pocket. Dean's got a date with a sixth-year Hufflepuff, Ron announced miserably, throwing himself onto his own bed. Even Neville's got someone. He asked Ginny when he couldn't get Hermione. Harry barely heard him. His mind was spinning with a completely insane idea. So insane it just might work. Ron, he said slowly, what if I told you I might have a solution to my date problem? Ron sat up. You've asked someone. Who? Not exactly. Harry pulled out the photo and handed it to Ron. I've just found out I have relatives in America. Ron squinted at the photo. Blimey, Harry. What is that hairy thing? According to this, that's cousin ITT. Apparently related to me somehow through the Potter family. And, you're thinking of asking your hairy American cousin to the Yule Ball? Ron asked incredulously. Mate, I know you're desperate, but that's brilliant. Harry finished. Think about it. McGonagall said I need a partner for the dance. She never specified it had to be a girl from Hogwarts. Ron stared at him. Have you gone mental? That's not even human. We don't know that, Harry countered, warming to his idea. Besides, I'd be bringing family. No one could object to that. Everyone would object to that. Look at it. Harry looked at the photo again. Cousin ITT was actually doing an impressive twirl in the moving wizarding photo, making the witch next to him, Morticia, clap delightedly. It looks like ITT can dance, Harry pointed out. That's more than I can say for myself. Ron buried his face in his hands. This is barking. Completely barking. Got any better ideas? Harry challenged. Ron was silent for a moment, then sighed. How would you even contact it? Harry hadn't thought that far. I guess I'd send Hedwig with a letter. To America? That would take days. Not necessarily, came Hermione's voice from the doorway. Both boys jumped. Sorry, I was coming to apologize for snapping earlier, she explained, entering the room. What are you sending to America? Harry hesitated, then handed her the photo. I just found out I have American relatives. I'm thinking of inviting one to the Yule Ball. Hermione's eyes widened as she studied the picture. Harry, what exactly is this person? Cousin ITT, apparently. Related to me through some complicated Potter family connection. And you want to invite ITT to be your date? Not my date, Harry corrected. My partner for the ball. There's a difference. Hermione handed the photo back, her expression unreadable. You know what? This entire tournament has been ridiculous from the start. Why not add a walking hairball to the mix? Ron gaped at her. You're not seriously encouraging this? International port keys can be arranged on short notice in special circumstances, Hermione continued, ignoring Ron. If you write the letter tonight, and we send it with a school owl rather than Hedwig, no offense to her, but the international owls have special training, it could reach America by tomorrow. Harry grinned. Hermione, you're brilliant. I'm not endorsing this plan, she clarified. I'm just saying it's technically possible. And honestly, at this point, I'm curious to see what would happen. 20 minutes later, Harry had composed his letter. Dear Cousin Itt, you don't know me, but my name is Harry Potter. I'm James and Lily Potter's son. I found a photo of you with my parents, and I learned we're related somehow. I'm writing because I'm in a bit of a bind. I'm currently competing in the Triwizard Tournament at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in Scotland, and there's a formal Yule Ball in 3 days that I'm required to attend with a partner. I know this is incredibly last minute and probably sounds mad, but would you consider coming to the ball as my guest? It would be nice to meet some of my family, and I think it would be an interesting experience for both of us. If you're willing, please respond as soon as possible. The ball is on Christmas night. Sincerely, Harry Potter P.S. I've enclosed the photo I found of you with my parents. I hope it brings back good memories. This is absolutely mental, Ron said for the 10th time as they watched the school's fastest international owl soar away with Harry's letter. Probably, Harry agreed, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and excitement. But at this point, what do I have to lose? The next morning, Harry woke to a light tapping on his dormitory window. Bleary-eyed, he stumbled out of bed and peered through the glass. Instead of an owl, an enormous raven with what looked like a tiny top hat perched on its head was pecking at the window. What the? Harry opened the window, and the raven swooped in, dropped a thick black envelope onto his bed, cawed once, and flew back out. The envelope was sealed with dark red wax stamped with an ornate A. Harry broke the seal and pulled out a card made of heavy black paper with elegant silver writing. Dearest Cousin Harry, what a delightful surprise to hear from Lily and James's boy. Your parents were absolutely charming, your mother especially had a wonderful sense of the macabre. I would be honored to accompany you to your Yule Ball. Nothing brings me greater joy than family occasions, particularly those involving dancing, formal wear, and the potential for delicious scandal. I shall arrive on the evening of the 24th to allow time for proper introductions before the ball. Please inform your school's authorities to expect me via the Addams family's private transportation network. Standard magical travel methods don't accommodate my unique physiology. I look forward to our meeting with the utmost anticipation. Your hirsute relative, Cousin Itt P.S. Thank you for the photograph. It reminded me of when your father challenged me to a fire whiskey drinking contest. I won, naturally, though James did remarkably well for someone with visible internal organs. Harry read the letter 3 times, reality slowly sinking in. ITT had accepted. ITT was coming to Hogwarts. Tomorrow. Oh my God, he whispered. What have I done? He sprinted down to the common room, still in his pajamas, clutching the letter. Hermione was already there, reading by the fire. ITT said yes. Harry thrust the letter at her. ITT's coming tomorrow. Hermione read the note, her eyes growing wider with each line. Harry, do you realize what you've done? You've invited a completely unknown magical being to Hogwarts without any approval. I know. Harry ran his hands through his hair. I didn't think ITT would actually say yes. What do I do now? You have to tell Professor McGonagall immediately, Hermione said firmly. And probably Dumbledore too. Harry groaned. They're going to think I've lost my mind. To be fair, that's a reasonable conclusion, Hermione pointed out. After a hasty breakfast where Harry could barely eat, he and Hermione made their way to Professor McGonagall's office. Harry knocked, his heart pounding. Enter, came McGonagall's crisp voice. They stepped inside to find her grading papers at her desk. Potter, Miss Granger. "What can I do for you?" she asked, setting her quill down. "Professor, I've found a partner for the Yule Ball," Harry began. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Excellent. I was beginning to worry. May I ask who the fortunate young lady is?" "It's not exactly a young lady," Harry said, his voice cracking. "It's my cousin. From America." McGonagall's eyebrows rose. "I wasn't aware you had relatives in the United States, Potter." "Neither was I until yesterday," Harry admitted, then handed her the photo and ITT's response. As McGonagall examined them, her face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally, resignation. "Potter," she said slowly, "am I to understand that you have invited an unidentified magical being of unknown classification to attend a formal school function, and this being is arriving tomorrow?" "Yes, Professor," Harry confirmed weakly. "But ITT is family." "That remains to be seen," McGonagall said, standing up. "We need to speak with the headmaster immediately." 20 minutes later, Harry found himself in Dumbledore's office, watching as the headmaster examined both the photo and ITT's response with what appeared to be growing delight. "Fascinating," Dumbledore murmured, his blue eyes twinkling. "Simply fascinating. The Addams family is quite renowned in certain obscure magical circles, though I've never had the pleasure of meeting them personally." "You've heard of them?" Harry asked, surprised. "Indeed. They maintain a rather unique position in the magical community, neither fully wizard nor muggle, but something altogether their own." Dumbledore smiled at Harry. "Your cousin ITT, in particular, is something of a mystery. No one has ever quite determined what manner of being ITT is." "Albus," Professor McGonagall interjected, "surely you're not considering allowing this creature to attend the ball?" "And why not, Minerva?" Dumbledore asked mildly. "Harry has invited a family member, which is perfectly acceptable. The fact that the family member happens to be a sentient mass of hair simply adds a touch of the unexpected to what promises to be a memorable evening." McGonagall looked like she was fighting a severe headache. "What about security concerns?" "We know nothing about this being's capabilities or intentions. ITT's intentions appear to be attending a ball with a long-lost relative," Dumbledore pointed out. "As for capabilities, I expect we'll discover those soon enough. I've always found that the most enlightening approach to the unknown is to welcome it with open arms." Harry couldn't believe his ears. Dumbledore was actually approving this madness. "So, ITT can come?" Harry asked tentatively. "Certainly," Dumbledore beamed. "In fact, I shall make arrangements for suitable guest quarters immediately. I assume your cousin will be arriving by this private transportation network mentioned in the letter?" "I guess so," Harry said weakly. The letter didn't specify exactly how. All the more reason for anticipation. Dumbledore clapped his hands together. "I shall inform the staff to expect an unusual visitor tomorrow evening. Harry, I suggest you prepare your friends for your cousin's arrival. New experiences are always more enjoyable when shared." As Harry and Hermione left Dumbledore's office, McGonagall's voice drifted after them. "Albus, have you finally taken complete leave of your senses?" "Quite possibly, Minerva," came Dumbledore's cheerful reply. "Isn't it exhilarating? News travels with supernatural speed at Hogwarts." By dinner time, the entire school knew that Harry Potter had invited some mysterious American cousin to the Yule Ball. Speculation ran wild: was this cousin famous? Rich? Why had no one ever heard of Potter having American relatives before? "I still can't believe Dumbledore approved this," Ron said through a mouthful of shepherd's pie. "No offense, mate, but your cousin looks like something Hagrid would keep as a pet." "Ron!" Hermione hissed, but Harry just shrugged. "Honestly, I'm still in shock myself," he admitted. "I never expected ITT to say yes." "What exactly is ITT, anyway?" Ginny asked, leaning forward with interest. "In the photo you showed Ron," it just looks like hair." "No idea," Harry replied. "According to Dumbledore, nobody knows for sure." "Brilliant," Fred interjected, appearing behind them with George. "Absolutely brilliant, Harry. When we heard you'd invited a walking hairball to the Yule Ball, we knew you were truly one of us," George finished. "A proper chaos agent." "It wasn't intentional," Harry protested. "I just needed a partner for the ball." "The best chaos is unintentional," Fred said sagely. "We're actually a bit jealous we didn't think of importing exotic magical creatures for dates." "ITT is not an exotic magical creature," Harry insisted, though he wasn't entirely convinced of this himself. "ITT is my cousin." "Your cousin that's made of hair," George pointed out. "With excellent taste in beverages, apparently," Fred added, having glimpsed the photo. From across the Great Hall, Harry noticed Malfoy watching him with narrowed eyes. It didn't take long for the Slytherin to saunter over, flanked as usual by Crabbe and Goyle. "So, Potter," Malfoy drawled, "word is you're so desperate for a date you're importing some sort of American freak." Harry felt a flash of anger. "At least I'm not taking someone who looks like they're constantly smelling something rotten, Malfoy." Malfoy's pale face flushed. Pansy Parkinson, his date to the ball, was standing just within earshot. "Watch yourself, Potter," Malfoy hissed. "When your freakish relative shows up, we'll see who's laughing." "Looking forward to it," Harry replied coolly. As Malfoy stalked away, Hermione gave Harry an appraising look. "You seem remarkably calm about all this now." Harry considered this. "I figure I've already faced a dragon. How much worse could a formal dance with my hairy cousin be?" The next evening, Harry paced nervously in the entrance hall. Dumbledore had sent word that he should be there to greet ITT when they arrived, though exactly when and how remained a mystery. Ron and Hermione waited with him, along with a small crowd of curious students who had heard about the impending arrival of Harry Potter's mysterious American cousin. Professor McGonagall stood nearby, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, while Dumbledore looked positively gleeful. "What time did your cousin say they'd arrive, Potter?" McGonagall asked for the third time. "Just evening, Professor," Harry repeated. The letter wasn't specific. "Americans," McGonagall muttered. "Notoriously cavalier about punctuality." Suddenly, the enormous front doors of the castle began to creak, though nobody was pushing them. A cold wind swept into the entrance hall, carrying with it the scent of something Harry couldn't quite identify, like ozone mixed with cinnamon and decay. The doors swung fully open to reveal absolutely nothing. Just the dark grounds of Hogwarts. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Ron whispered. Then the floor began to tremble. A small crack appeared in the stone directly in front of the open doors, spreading like a spiderweb. Several students backed away nervously. "Fascinating," Dumbledore murmured, stepping closer rather than retreating. The crack widened, and a strange gurgling sound emerged from it. Then, in a sudden explosion of smoke and an odd chittering noise, something shot up through the floor. When the smoke cleared, there stood Cousin ITT. In person, ITT was both exactly as Harry expected and completely surprising. About 4 feet tall, ITT appeared to be nothing but hair, luxurious, flowing hair that reached the floor and completely obscured any body that might be underneath. The hair was a rich amber color, immaculately groomed, and it wore tiny round sunglasses perched where eyes should be and a small bowler hat on top. Most surprisingly, ITT carried a miniature leather suitcase and was dressed in what appeared to be the bottom half of an exquisite three-piece suit, visible beneath the curtain of hair. A collective gasp went up from the assembled crowd. "Sheep Weedle chirp click whistle brrrr," said ITT, in a high-pitched, rapid series of unintelligible sounds. Harry stared, completely at a loss for how to respond. Hello," he managed finally. "I'm Harry. Thank you for coming." ITT set down the tiny suitcase and moved forward with a peculiar gliding motion. Before Harry knew what was happening, he was enveloped in hair as ITT embraced him. The experience was surprisingly pleasant. ITT's hair was soft and smelled faintly of exotic spices. Clickety were chirp whistle pop pop, ITT said, releasing Harry and turning in a circle, apparently taking in the surroundings. I'm afraid we don't quite understand you, my hirsute friend, Dumbledore said, stepping forward with a deep bow. Albus Dumbledore, Headmaster of Hogwarts. A pleasure to welcome such a distinguished visitor. ITT extended what seemed to be a hand from within the mass of hair, though it too was covered in hair, and shook Dumbledore's with vigor. Whir click pop pop whistle sheep, ITT replied. This is going to be a problem, Hermione whispered to Harry. How are you going to communicate? As if hearing her, ITT reached into the depths of its hair and pulled out a small, ornate device that looked like a cross between a pocket watch and a music box. ITT wound at once, placed it on the floor, and stepped back. The device sprang open and projected a glowing orb of light that hovered in the air between ITT and the onlookers. Translation enchantment activated, announced a crisp, vaguely British voice that seemed to emanate from the orb. Addams family patent pending. Please stand by. ITT spoke again, chirp whistle click brrrr weep weep, and this time the orb translated, Greetings, Wizards of Hogwarts. Cousin ITT of the Addams family is honored to make your acquaintance. Cousin Harry, you have your mother's eyes and your father's talent for creating spectacular situations. Harry blinked in surprise. You remember my parents well. Chirp chirp whistle pop, said ITT, and the orb translated, Indeed. Your mother had a delightful appreciation for poisons, and your father once challenged me to a drinking contest that ended with him hanging upside down from a chandelier singing something about Quidditch. Several people laughed, and Harry felt a warm glow at this new information about his parents. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat. Perhaps we should continue this reunion somewhere more private. The entire school seems to have gathered. She wasn't exaggerating. The entrance hall had filled with students and staff, all staring in fascinated horror at ITT. Of course, Dumbledore agreed. We've prepared guest quarters for Mr. ITT in the East Wing. Harry, perhaps you'd like to show your cousin the way. Professor McGonagall and I will join you shortly after dispersing this impromptu welcome committee. Harry nodded, still somewhat dazed. This way, cousin ITT. As they walked through the corridors, followed by Ron and Hermione, and the floating translation orb, Harry couldn't help noticing the trail of shocked faces they left in their wake. Portraits whispered frantically to each other, and even the ghosts stopped to stare. So, was your journey okay? Harry asked, trying to make conversation. Wheedle pop click whistle, said ITT, and the orb translated, quite pleasant. I traveled via the family crypt network. We Addamses have burial grounds across the world, and they're all connected through the other side. Makes international travel so much more convenient than those dreadful port keys. You traveled through graves? Ron asked, looking horrified. Chirp whistle pop, of course. So much more civilized than being yanked through space by your navel, don't you think? Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. This was going to be an interesting visit. They arrived at the guest quarters, where Dumbledore had apparently spared no expense. The room was spacious, with a large four-poster bed, a sitting area, and an ensuite bathroom. I hope this will be comfortable, Harry said. ITT made a series of rapid chirping sounds that the orb translated as, charming. Though it could use more cobwebs. And perhaps a resident spectre. No matter, I've brought some essentials to make it homey. ITT opened a tiny suitcase, which seemed to contain far more than should have been physically possible. From its depths, ITT withdrew several items, a miniature guillotine that ITT placed on the bedside table, a candelabra with black candles that emitted green flames when ITT lit them with a snap of hidden fingers, and what appeared to be a potted plant with tentacles that immediately began exploring its surroundings. Homey, Ron muttered under his breath. So, cousin ITT, Hermione began cautiously, Harry mentioned that you and his parents were related through a complicated family connection? Whistle pop chirp chirp, yes, through marriage and a blood pact in the 1920s. Your grandfather's sister married into the Addams clan, Harry. We've kept loose familial ties ever since, though the British wizarding world tends to pretend we don't exist. Too unconventional for their tastes. I didn't know any of this, Harry admitted. Chirp whistle were, not surprising. The Potter family has always had a respectable public face and a more interesting private one. Your father embraced both sides. We lost touch after your parents' tragic demise. The Addamses sent a wreath of deadly nightshade to the funeral, but it was returned by someone named Dursley with a rather rude note. Harry grimaced. That sounded like Uncle Vernon. Well, I'm glad we're reconnecting now, he said sincerely. ITT made a sound that seemed like an emotional trill, which the orb translated as, family is everything, Harry. The Addamses never forget our own, no matter how distant or how normal they might appear. The way ITT said, normal, made it sound like a mild affliction one might overcome with the right attitude. There was a knock at the door, and Dumbledore entered with Professor McGonagall. I trust you're settling in nicely, Mr. ITT? Dumbledore asked cheerfully. Chirp whistle pop pop, quite comfortably, Headmaster. Though I must ask, is that delightful forest on the grounds available for midnight strolls? I spotted some fascinating creatures from the carriage. The Forbidden Forest? McGonagall looked alarmed. Absolutely not. It's extremely dangerous, particularly after dark. Whistle chirp were, dangerous. How delightful. We must arrange an excursion. Dumbledore chuckled. Perhaps a supervised visit could be arranged during your stay. Now, I understand you'll be accompanying Harry to the Yule Ball tomorrow evening? Chirp whistle pop, indeed. I've brought my finest formal attire for the occasion. The Addamses take ballroom dancing very seriously. It's one of the few socially acceptable ways to twirl someone until they're dizzy with passion. McGonagall made a strangled sound. Yes, well. There are certain protocols for the opening dance. As Mr. Potter is a champion, you'll be expected to participate in the first dance with the other champions and their partners. Whistle chirp pop chirp, I shall bring honor to both our families with my dancing prowess, Professor. My tango once caused 3 dowagers to faint in New Orleans. Harry suddenly realized he had no idea how to dance. With everything else going on, that minor detail had completely slipped his mind. Cousin ITT, he said hesitantly, I should probably mention that I don't actually know how to dance. ITT went completely still for a moment, then erupted in a flurry of chirps and whistles that the translation orb struggled to keep up with. No nephew of mine will embarrass the family with subpar dancing. We shall begin lessons immediately. Clear this furniture. Without waiting for permission, ITT began pushing the heavy armchairs aside with surprising strength. Perhaps this would be better conducted in a more suitable location, Dumbledore suggested, eyes twinkling. The Transfiguration classroom has been cleared for dance practice already. Professor McGonagall has been instructing students there. McGonagall nodded stiffly. I can supervise if you wish to use it now. Chirp whistle pop, perfect. Lead the way, madam. Harry, bring your friends. Everyone should know how to dance properly, it's an essential skill for both courtship and escaping angry mobs. As they followed McGonagall to the Transfiguration classroom, Harry whispered to Ron and Hermione, is it too late to go back to the dragon? Much too late, Hermione confirmed, fighting a smile. But look on the bright side, at least things can't get any stranger. Harry highly doubted that. The dance lesson with Cousin ITT was an experience Harry would never forget, though not for lack of trying. ITT turned out to be an enthusiastic but unorthodox instructor. Within minutes of entering the cleared Transfiguration classroom, ITT had conjured a strange-looking phonograph that played what ITT called traditional Addams waltzes, music that sounded like classical compositions being performed underwater by cats. Chirp whistle pop, dancing is not about steps, Harry. It's about passion. Intent. Conveying with your body what words cannot express. I'd settle for not stepping on anyone's feet, Harry muttered. ITT demonstrated the basic waltz position, somehow managing to look elegant despite being a mass of hair in a bowler hat. When it came time for Harry to practice, he found himself partnered with a surprisingly solid ITT, who guided him through the steps with unexpected grace. Wheedle chirp pop, back straight. Chin up. Imagine you're leading your partner through a field of venomous snakes, one misstep could be fatal. Ron, who had been dragged into practicing as well, snorted with laughter and promptly tripped over his own feet, sending Hermione stumbling. Sorry, he exclaimed, ears turning red. Professor McGonagall watched from her desk, her expression oscillating between horror and reluctant admiration as ITT demonstrated increasingly elaborate dance moves. Chirp whistle pop chirp, the key to impressing onlookers is the dip. When executed properly, a good dip makes your partner feel simultaneously in danger and completely safe. ITT then proceeded to demonstrate by dipping Harry so low his hair nearly touched the floor, holding him there with surprising strength before whirling him back up. I think I'm going to be sick, Harry gasped when he was upright again. Wheedle chirp pop, excellent. That means it's working. By the end of 2 hours, Harry could perform a basic waltz without major catastrophe, though his technique, according to ITT, was adequate for someone raised by non-dancing barbarians. As they were leaving the classroom, they ran into Draco Malfoy and his cronies, who had clearly been lurking in the corridor waiting for them. Well, Malfoy drawled, if it isn't Potter and his pet mop. ITT turned toward Malfoy, the tiny sunglasses somehow conveying intense scrutiny despite the lack of visible eyes behind them. Chirp whistle pop, platinum hair, pointy features, and an exaggerated sense of self-importance. You must be a Malfoy. Your grandfather Abraxas once tried to have my Uncle Fester arrested for grave tampering in 1962. How is the old spider these days? Malfoy's smirk faltered. My grandfather has been dead for years. Whistle chirp pop, dead. How fortunate for him. The best social connections are made in the afterlife. You simply must try it sometime. Crabbe and Goyle shifted uncomfortably, while Malfoy's face flushed with anger. You think you're funny, bringing this thing to Hogwarts, Potter, he spat. Wait until my father hears about this abomination attending the Yule Ball. Chirp whistle pop chirp, please do tell Lucius. Last time we met, he lost a game of poker to me and still owes 3 drops of blood and a childhood memory. Adamses never forget a debt. Malfoy's face went from flushed to pale so quickly it was almost comical. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams family never lies about debts, young Malfoy. It's bad form. We may occasionally misrepresent our intentions regarding experimental potions or the purpose of certain ritual knives, but gambling debts are sacred. Malfoy backed away, then turned and walked quickly down the corridor, Crabbe and Goyle hurrying after him. That was brilliant. Ron exclaimed when they were gone. ITT made a dismissive gesture with a hair-covered hand. Whistle chirp pop, the Malfoys have always been tedious. All that focus on blood purity with none of the fun blood rituals to back it up. Harry decided not to ask what fun blood rituals might entail. Word of ITT's arrival spread throughout the castle like fiendfire. By morning, the corridors were alive with whispers and speculation. Students went out of their way to pass by the guest quarters, hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious hair being who had apparently made Draco Malfoy flee in terror. At breakfast, Harry found himself the center of attention once again. ITT had opted to join them in the Great Hall, causing a sensation as they glided between the tables to sit at Gryffindor. ITT's eating habits were peculiar, to say the least. Though no mouth was visible beneath the curtain of hair, food seemed to disappear when ITT held it up to what should have been a face. ITT particularly enjoyed the kippers, consuming them with enthusiastic chirping sounds. Is your cousin actually eating those, or just storing them in all that hair? Seamus asked, watching in fascination. Whistle chirp pop, digestion is a private matter, young wizard. In some cultures, it's considered the height of rudeness to question another being's consumption methods. Seamus turned red and mumbled an apology. After breakfast, Harry faced a dilemma. He had promised to show ITT around Hogwarts, but he also had classes to attend. Perhaps I could take Cousin ITT on a tour while you're in potions, Hermione suggested. Professor Vector gave me a free period to work on my arithmancy project. Harry looked uncertain. Are you sure? ITT can be a bit intense. Chirp whistle pop, I promise to behave appropriately for a school environment. I shall restrain my natural inclination toward exploring hidden passages and ancient burial chambers until after dark. That's not exactly reassuring, Harry muttered, but he didn't have much choice. All right, but please don't let ITT wander off alone. And definitely keep ITT away from the Forbidden Forest. I'm perfectly capable of being responsible, Hermione said primly. Whistle chirp pop, and I am perfectly capable of appearing to follow rules while technically violating them in ways no one anticipated. We'll get along splendidly. Harry went to potions with a sense of impending doom. Snape was in a particularly foul mood, possibly due to the rumors about an unclassifiable magical being roaming the castle. Potter, Snape said silkily as Harry entered, I understand you've imported some manner of hairy abomination for the Yule Ball. Trust you to find new ways to draw attention to yourself. ITT is my cousin, sir, Harry replied stiffly. Indeed, Snape's lip curled. How fortunate that your family tree includes branches even more freakish than yourself. Harry bit back a retort, knowing it would only cost Gryffindor points. The lesson proceeded with Snape being even more vindictive than usual, but Harry's mind was elsewhere. What was Hermione doing with ITT? How much trouble could they possibly get into in one morning? He got his answer when he arrived at the Great Hall for lunch and found a small crowd gathered around Hermione and ITT, who appeared to be giving some kind of demonstration. What's going on? Harry asked Ron, who had arrived ahead of him. Your cousin is showing everyone how to detect poisons, Ron replied, looking both impressed and disturbed. Apparently ITT can smell them through the hair. Harry pushed through the crowd to find ITT holding up various student goblets and either approving them with a thumbs up or setting them aside with disapproving chirps. Whistle chirp pop, this one contains trace amounts of drowsiness draft. Not lethal, but would give you embarrassing drool patterns on your afternoon schoolwork. Fred Weasley looked impressed. I was just testing it. How did you know? Chirp whistle pop, the Addams children learn poison detection before they learn to walk. Survival necessity. Hermione caught sight of Harry and waved him over. Harry. Your cousin has been teaching us fascinating detection methods. Did you know ITT can identify 27 distinct poisons just by sound? Apparently, different toxic substances disrupt magical fields in ways that create unique audio signatures. That's great, Harry said weakly. How was the tour? Oh, wonderful. Hermione beamed. We visited the library, where Madame Pants almost had a fit when ITT identified 3 cursed books she didn't know about, and then we ran into Hagrid, who was absolutely fascinated by ITT. He wants to know if ITT would be willing to visit his Care of Magical Creatures class. Chirp whistle pop, a delightful man with an appropriate appreciation for misunderstood creatures. I've promised to introduce him to Cousin What next time he visits America. They'd get along famously. Cousin What? Harry asked cautiously. Whistle chirp pop, ITT gestured vaguely, like me, but smaller and more volatile. Excellent with explosives. Harry decided that introducing Hagrid to more Addams family members was a problem for another day. We should probably eat lunch, he suggested. The afternoon classes will be starting soon. As they sat down, Harry noticed that students from all houses, including Slytherin, were watching ITT with fascination rather than the initial horror. ITT's novelty had somehow transformed into a kind of bizarre celebrity. Even more surprisingly, Professor Flitwick approached their table, looking excited. "Mr. ITT," he squeaked, "I couldn't help overhearing that you possess unique magical detection abilities. I wonder if you might consider giving a demonstration to my advanced charms class. We're studying concealment and detection spells this term." Chirp whistle pop, "I would be delighted, Professor. The Addams family has developed several unconventional detection methods over the centuries, primarily to locate hidden relatives who might have been walled up during family disagreements." Flitwick looked momentarily taken aback but rallied quickly. "Splendid. Perhaps this afternoon, if you're available." Whistle chirp pop, "My schedule is entirely open until the ball. Cousin Harry, you don't mind if I participate in educational activities while you're in class?" Harry couldn't very well object to ITT keeping busy with supervised, educational demonstrations. It seemed far safer than whatever ITT might get up to on their own. "That sounds great," he said. "Just promise you won't demonstrate anything dangerous." Chirp whistle pop, define dangerous. By Addams standards or by normal wizard standards? The distinction is crucial. Normal wizard standards, Harry clarified firmly. Whistle chirp pop, how limiting. But I shall endeavor to comply. As lunch continued, Harry noticed a commotion at the entrance to the Great Hall. Rita Skeeter had arrived, her acid green quill already floating beside her as she surveyed the room. Her predatory gaze fixed on Harry and ITT, and she made a beeline for their table. "Harry Potter," she exclaimed, flashing an insincere smile. "And this must be your mysterious American cousin. Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet. The wizarding world is simply dying to know more about your unusual guest." Before Harry could intervene, ITT stood and extended a hair-covered hand. Chirp whistle pop, cousin ITT of the Addams family. "Charmed to meet a fellow appreciator of sensationalism, Miss Skeeter. Your reputation precedes you." Rita looked momentarily surprised that ITT knew of her but recovered quickly. "How fascinating. And what exactly are you, Mr. ITT? Some form of magical creature? A transfiguration experiment gone awry?" Whistle chirp pop, "I am simply ITT. Classification attempts have driven 3 ministry departments to nervous breakdowns. The unspeakables have a betting pool about my species that's been running since 1879. Rita's quill was scratching furiously. "And your relationship to Harry Potter?" Chirp whistle pop, "Family is family, Miss Skeeter. The Addams and Potter bloodlines intertwined generations ago, creating a bond that transcends conventional taxonomy. And why have we never heard of this connection before?" Rita pressed, her eyes gleaming with the scent of scandal. Whistle chirp pop, "Some family connections are kept quiet for the safety of all involved. The British wizarding world has always been somewhat limited in its acceptance of diversity." James and Lily understood this, though they never let prejudice prevent them from attending our family gatherings. Harry's ears perked up at this new information about his parents. "So Harry's parents were close to your family?" Rita asked, leaning in eagerly. Chirp whistle pop, "They spent their honeymoon at the Addams ancestral home. Lily had a particular fondness for Grandmama's special brews, and James enjoyed Uncle Fester's explosive demonstrations. They understood that embracing the unusual is the truest form of living." Harry was fascinated. He'd never heard these stories about his parents before. Rita turned to him. "And how does it feel, Harry, to discover this unconventional branch of your family tree?" For once, Harry didn't mind answering Rita's question. "It feels brilliant, actually. I've spent my life thinking I didn't have any family besides the Dursleys. Finding out about cousin ITT and the Addamses. It's like discovering a piece of myself I never knew was missing." It was the truth, Harry realized with surprise. Despite ITT's strangeness, or perhaps because of it, there was something oddly comforting about having this connection to his parents' past. Rita's quill paused, and she seemed momentarily thrown by Harry's sincere answer. She quickly regained her predatory focus. "And what do your Muggle relatives think of your hairy cousin?" Harry snorted. "They don't know, and I hope they never find out. They'd probably die of shock, which might actually improve Christmas dinner this year." Chirp whistle pop, family members who don't appreciate hair are hardly worth keeping, in my experience. Though they can make excellent fertilizer for the carnivorous garden plants. Rita's eyes widened at this, and her quill nearly snapped with excitement. "I think that's enough questions for now," Hermione interjected firmly. "Lunch is almost over." Rita looked like she wanted to protest, but Professor McGonagall had noticed her presence and was approaching with a stern expression. "Ms. Skeeter," McGonagall said coldly, "I don't recall issuing a press pass for you to enter the school grounds." "Just a friendly chat with young Harry and his fascinating relative," Rita replied with a saccharine smile. "The public has a right to know about unusual visitors to Hogwarts, particularly ones attending official school functions." Chirp whistle pop, Professor McGonagall, please don't chase Ms. Skeeter away on my account. The Addams family has always believed that publicity, whether flattering or horrifying, keeps the bloodline vibrant. Besides, she has the most fascinating aura of deception around her, quite impressive magical concealment. McGonagall raised an eyebrow, while Rita suddenly looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean, aura of deception?" Hermione asked sharply. Whistle chirp pop, "Oh, merely that Ms. Skeeter clearly has talents beyond ordinary reporting. The magical signature around her suggests transformation capabilities of an unregistered nature. Quite ingenious, really." Rita went pale. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," she said, gathering her things hastily. "I have quite enough for a preliminary article. I'll be in touch for a follow-up interview, Harry." She practically ran from the Great Hall. "What was that about?" Ron asked, confused. Hermione was staring after Rita with a calculating expression. "I think Cousin Itt just revealed something very interesting about Rita Skeeter." Chirp whistle pop, family protects family, Cousin Harry. "That woman has been writing unkind things about you. The Addamses have our own ways of dealing with hostile press." Harry felt a surge of gratitude toward his strange cousin. "Thanks, ITT. Whistle chirp pop, think nothing of it. Now, I believe I have a charms demonstration to prepare for. Shall I meet you after your classes to continue preparations for the ball?" Harry nodded, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread about what the evening would bring. By dinner time, Cousin Itt had become a Hogwarts sensation. Students from all houses were talking about the demonstrations ITT had given in Flitwick's Advanced Charms class, where ITT had apparently detected hidden objects with such precision that Flitwick had declared it revolutionary and worthy of publication in Charms Quarterly. Even more surprising, ITT had been invited to Professor Sprout's greenhouse to examine some troublesome plants that weren't thriving. ITT had diagnosed the problem immediately, whistle chirp pop, they're homesick. Plants from the Malatian Death Valleys need to be whispered to in ancient Sumerian at midnight during the new moon. Also, the soil needs more bone meal. ITT's growing popularity didn't sit well with everyone. Draco Malfoy had been noticeably absent since their corridor encounter, and Snape had been seen glowering more ferociously than usual. "Your cousin's quite the hit," Ginny commented as she joined them at dinner. "I heard the Beauxbatons students want ITT to give them fashion advice for the ball." "Fashion advice?" Harry repeated, bewildered. ITT is literally just hair in a bowler hat. Chirp whistle pop, style transcends conventional form, Cousin Harry. The Addams family has been setting macabre fashion trends for generations. Morticia's funeral gown collection is the envy of the East Coast. Speaking of the ball, Hermione said, "Have you decided what you're wearing, Harry?" Harry had almost forgotten about his own attire, what with everything else going on. "I've got dress robes that Mrs. Weasley bought me. They're pretty standard." Chirp whistle pop, standard. For a Potter Adams? Unacceptable. We must review your formal wear immediately. After dinner, they retreated to the Gryffindor dormitory, where ITT insisted on inspecting Harry's dress robes. The bottle green robes that had seemed perfectly fine when Mrs. Weasley selected them now looked hopelessly plain under ITT's critical assessment. Whistle chirp pop, adequate material, but lacking distinction. We must accessorize. From the seemingly bottomless tiny suitcase, ITT produced an array of items, a silver watch chain with a peculiar emblem, cufflinks shaped like tiny screaming faces, and a handkerchief that appeared to be moving slightly of its own accord. Are those faces, actually screaming? Ron asked, peering at the cufflinks. Chirp whistle pop, only when exposed to moonlight. A traditional Adams accessory for formal events, lets you know when midnight approaches by their increasing volume. I'm not sure, Harry began, but ITT was already attaching the watch chain to his robes. Whistle chirp pop, trust me, Cousin Harry. The Potter side of your family may favor understated elegance, but a touch of Adams flair never goes amiss. Your father wore these same cufflinks to his wedding. That settled it for Harry. If his father had worn them, he would too. What are you wearing to the ball, ITT? Hermione asked curiously. ITT opened the suitcase again and pulled out what appeared to be a miniature tuxedo, complete with tails and a top hat instead of the usual bowler. Chirp whistle pop, my formal evening attire. The Addams family never underdresses for a ball. Cousin Harry, I shall meet your expectations and uphold both our family traditions. Harry suddenly realized that ITT genuinely cared about representing their family connection well, strange as it might be. It was touching, in an oddly hair-covered way. I'm really glad you came, Cousin ITT, he said sincerely. Whatever happens tomorrow at the ball, it means a lot that you traveled all this way for me. Whistle chirp pop, family is everything, Harry. When you wrote to me, I knew immediately I must come. Not just for a ball, but because it was time for you to know more of your heritage. The Potters and the Addamses may seem different, but we share something vital, we live life on our own terms, consequences be damned. Harry smiled. I'm starting to see that. The dormitory door burst open, and the Weasley twins bounded in, followed by Lee Jordan. There you are. Fred exclaimed. We've been looking everywhere for you and Cousin ITT. We've got an incredible business proposition, George added, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Chirp whistle pop, business. The Addams family has a long tradition of unusual ventures. Do continue. We're developing a line of joke products, Fred explained. And after seeing some of your unique abilities, we were wondering if you'd consider a limited partnership. Specifically, George continued, we'd pay good galleons for the secret to how you detected Fred's drowsiness draft. That kind of detection avoidance could revolutionize our skiving snack boxes. Whistle chirp pop, young entrepreneurs. How delightful. The Addams family has always supported innovation, particularly when it involves mild mischief and potential chaos. For the next hour, the twins and ITT engaged in intense negotiations that Harry could barely follow. It involved percentages, distribution rights in America, and something called cross-branding opportunities with the Addams family mail-order catalog. By the time they finished, the twins looked both terrified and thrilled, having apparently secured some kind of partnership that involved ITT sending them rare ingredients from America. Your cousin is a surprisingly shrewd businessman, Lee commented to Harry. Or businessperson. Or business, hair. Chirp whistle pop, in the realm of commerce, I identify as a corporate entity of unlimited liability. Gender is irrelevant when negotiating profit margins. The twins departed with promises to draft proper contracts, leaving Harry, Ron, and Hermione alone with ITT once more. You know, Ron said thoughtfully, I was pretty skeptical about this whole thing, but your cousin's actually quite brilliant, Harry. In a completely terrifying way. Whistle chirp pop, the finest compliment an Addams can receive. You remind me of your uncles, Ronald. The Pruitts were well known to the American magical community for their creative approach to experimental charms. Ron looked startled. You knew my uncles Fabian and Gideon? Chirp whistle pop, indeed. They visited the Addams mansion during a world tour in the 1970s. Gideon had a particular talent for making objects dance, and Fabian once charmed all our cutlery to recite Edgar Allan Poe during dinner. Grandmama was so impressed she only tried to poison him twice. Ron looked both disturbed and proud. No one ever tells me stories about them. Whistle chirp pop, a tragedy of wizarding culture, you hide away tales of your most interesting relatives. In the Addams family, our most outrageous ancestors get the largest portraits and the most frequent seances. As the evening wore on, ITT shared more stories about various magical families ITT had encountered over the decades, painting a picture of wizarding society that textbooks never mentioned. Harry was fascinated, particularly when ITT spoke about his parents. Chirp whistle pop, your mother had a wonderful darkness to her, Harry. Not evil, the Addamses recognized the difference, but a delicious complexity. She understood that light means nothing without shadow. And your father? A prankster with principles, always pushing boundaries while maintaining a core of steel. Harry soaked up every detail, storing these new perspectives on his parents like precious treasures. Eventually, Professor McGonagall arrived to escort ITT back to the guest quarters, reminding them all that the Yule Ball would begin at 8 o'clock sharp the following evening and that champions needed to arrive early for the processional. Whistle chirp pop, until tomorrow, Cousin Harry. Rest well, for we shall dance until dawn or until someone faints from excessive passion, whichever comes first. As ITT glided away with McGonagall, Harry found himself actually looking forward to the ball. With Cousin Itt by his side, it was sure to be an evening no one would forget. Harry woke on Christmas morning to find a small, oddly wrapped package at the foot of his bed. The wrapping paper was black with tiny silver nooses printed on it, tied with a ribbon that appeared to be made of actual hair. That's from your cousin, I reckon, Ron said, eyeing the package warily as he unwrapped his own more traditionally festive presents. Harry carefully untied the hair ribbon, which immediately slithered away and disappeared under his bed, and opened the package. Inside was an ornate silver locket on a heavy chain. The locket was engraved with intricate designs that seemed to move slightly when he wasn't looking directly at them. A note accompanied it, written in elegant, spidery handwriting, Dearest Cousin Harry, this locket has been in the Addams family for generations, passing to those who find themselves facing life's most exquisite dangers. Your father admired it during his visit to our home, and it seems fitting that it should now pass to you. When worn, it offers protection against certain fatal curses, though rarely in the way one expects. The Addams definition of protection often involves creative redirection rather than outright prevention. It also contains a strand of hair from each Addams family member, including now one of your own that I collected while you slept. Hope you don't mind, family tradition. Wear it tonight and always remember, blood is thicker than water, but venom is thicker than both. Your hirsute relative, Cousin Itt, blimey, Ron said, reading over Harry's shoulder. Is that dark magic? Harry examined the locket carefully. It didn't feel dark, strange, yes, but not malevolent. I think it's just Addams magic, he replied. Apparently there's a difference. He slipped the chain around his neck, and the locket settled against his chest with a comfortable weight, as if it had been waiting for him. The rest of Christmas Day passed in the usual festive blur of food, crackers, and snowball fights, though Harry noticed students and staff alike watching him with anticipation, clearly wondering what would happen at the ball that evening. As 6 o'clock approached, Harry returned to Gryffindor Tower to prepare. Ron was already there, looking glumly at his frilly dress robes. I still can't believe Mum bought me these, he moaned. I look like Great Aunt Tessie. Whistle chirp pop, nonsense. With a few adjustments, those could be quite spectacular. They both jumped. ITT was standing in the doorway of their dormitory, already dressed in the formal tuxedo, top hat perched jauntily on the mass of hair. "How did you get in here?" Harry asked, startled. "The fat lady doesn't let non-Gryffindors in." Chirp whistle pop. The fat lady and I had a delightful conversation about the portraiture techniques of the 16th century. She was so flattered by my knowledge of her artist that she quite forgot to ask for a password. ITT glided into the room and circled Ron, examining the maroon dress robes critically. Whistle chirp pop, the color is actually quite dignified. It's the lace that's problematic. Allow me. Before Ron could protest, ITT had produced a tiny pair of silver scissors from somewhere within the hair and began snipping away at the offending frills. The scissors moved with surprising precision, and within minutes, Ron's robes had been transformed from frilly nightmare to something almost elegant, still old-fashioned, but in a way that could be interpreted as deliberately vintage rather than simply outdated. Chirp whistle pop, there. A touch of Adam's tailoring. The trick is to make it look intentional rather than impoverished. Ron examined himself in the mirror, looking shocked. This, actually doesn't look terrible. Whistle chirp pop, a ringing endorsement. Now, Cousin Harry, let's prepare you. Harry's preparation was less dramatic but equally thorough. ITT adjusted his dress robes with expert precision, added the cufflinks and watch chain, and somehow managed to make Harry's perpetually messy hair look artfully tousled rather than simply chaotic. Chirp whistle pop, the Potter hair has always been resistant to taming. Your grandfather Fleamont made his fortune with hair potions trying to solve his own styling problems. Really? Harry had never known that about his family. Whistle chirp pop, indeed. The Addams family invested in his company. Hair-related ventures are something of a specialty for us, for obvious reasons. By 7:30, Harry felt as ready as he'd ever be. The Addams locket hung beneath his robes, and the tiny screaming face cufflinks, thankfully silent until moonlight, added a subtle but distinctive touch to his otherwise conventional attire. "You clean up pretty well, Potter," came a voice from the stairs. Hermione stood there in periwinkle blue robes, her hair sleek and shiny, looking completely transformed. "Wow," Harry said, genuinely impressed. "You look fantastic, Hermione." She smiled. "Thank you. And Cousin ITT, you look very distinguished." Whistle chirp pop, you're too kind. "Your gown is lovely, reminiscent of the drowning dress Grandmama wore to the New York Opera Gala of 1962. 5 marriage proposals and 2 restraining orders in one evening, a family record." Hermione looked unsure whether to be flattered or concerned by this comparison. They made their way down to the entrance hall, where students were gathering for the ball. The champions were instructed to wait to one side until everyone else had entered the Great Hall, so they could make their grand entrance for the opening dance. Fleur Delacour was with Roger Davies, looking so stunning that people actually stopped and stared as she passed. Cedric stood with Cho, who looked beautiful in silver robes. Victor Crumb was there too, standing next to Hermione. "You're going with Crumb?" Harry whispered to Hermione as she prepared to join her date. She blushed. "Yes. That's what I didn't want to tell you and Ron earlier. I should go to him now. Good luck with the dance." As Hermione joined Crumb, Harry stood with Cousin ITT, acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. ITT seemed completely unfazed, occasionally making courteous chirping noises to passing students who gawked at them. Professor McGonagall, wearing dress robes of red tartan and a wreath of thistles around her hat, approached them with a slightly strained smile. "Potter, Mr. ITT, are you ready for the procession?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Harry replied. Chirp whistle pop, absolutely. I've been practicing my most restrained dancing. Only minimal floor slides and no overhead lifts unless specifically requested. McGonagall's smile became even more fixed. "How considerate of you. Now, when the doors open, you'll proceed in with the other champions and take your places on the dance floor." The doors to the Great Hall swung open, revealing a winter wonderland inside. The walls had been covered in sparkling silver frost, with hundreds of garlands of mistletoe and ivy crossing the starry black ceiling. The house tables had been replaced by smaller, lantern-lit ones, leaving a large clear space in the middle for dancing. The students who had already entered turned to watch as the champions processed in with their partners. Harry felt every eye on him and ITT as they walked side by side, ITT's hair swaying with each step in perfect rhythm. To Harry's surprise, the reaction wasn't the horror or mockery he had expected. Instead, there was a kind of fascinated awe. ITT's formal attire, combined with their natural unusual appearance, created an effect that was less freak show and more exotic dignitary. They took their places on the dance floor, and the music began. Harry remembered his lessons with ITT and focused on not stepping on ITT's feet or hair. To his relief, ITT led subtly but effectively, guiding Harry through the steps with graceful movements that made Harry look far more competent than he actually was. Whistle chirp pop, you're doing wonderfully, Cousin Harry. Your father was equally tense at first, but he relaxed once the music took hold. As they twirled around the floor, Harry caught glimpses of the other champions. Crumb and Hermione were dancing with intense concentration. Cedric and Cho looked blissfully happy together. Fleur appeared to be disappointed with Davies, who was so dazed by her presence that he kept missing steps. By comparison, Harry and ITT made a surprisingly elegant pair. ITT's unique physiology allowed for movements that would be impossible for a human, creating a dance style that was mesmerizing to watch. Everyone's staring at us, Harry muttered as they glided past Professor Dumbledore, who was dancing with Madame Maxime. Whistle chirp pop, of course they are. We're spectacular. The Addams family draws attention by existing authentically. Better to be stared at for being remarkable than ignored for being ordinary. As the opening dance concluded, other couples joined them on the floor. Harry was relieved to step away from the spotlight, moving with ITT to the side of the room. Mind if we join you? Fred appeared with Angelina Johnson on his arm, George and Alicia Spinnet beside them. Chirp whistle pop, the more the merrier. In Addams gatherings, we consider a ball successful only when the dance floor is so crowded that at least 3 minor injuries occur. Angelina laughed. Your cousin is brilliant, Harry. Where have you been hiding ITT all these years? Family secret, Harry replied, finding himself smiling. The evening was actually going well, no disasters, no humiliation, just an unusual but enjoyable Christmas ball with his even more unusual relative. That peace lasted until dinner, when they found themselves seated at a table with, of all people, Draco Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson, along with several Durmstrang students. Potter, Malfoy acknowledged stiffly, clearly unhappy with the seating arrangement. Malfoy, Harry returned, equally unenthusiastic. Whistle chirp pop, young Malfoy. Excellent to see you again. I was just telling Cousin Harry about the time your father lost that poker game at the Transylvanian embassy. Did he ever mention that night to you? The stake was quite unusual, even by Addams standards. Malfoy turned slightly green. My father doesn't gamble. Whistle chirp pop, everyone gambles, young man. Some with cards, some with politics, some with darker forces. Your father has played all these games with varying success. Pansy Parkinson, who had been staring at ITT with undisguised disgust, finally spoke. What exactly are you? Some kind of magical creature Hagrid dug up? Chirp whistle pop, taxonomically ambiguous is my preferred classification. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures created a new subdepartment after my 3rd visit to London in 1887. They eventually abandoned classification attempts after the incident with the measuring tape and the spontaneous combustion. The Durmstrang students, far from being repulsed, seemed fascinated by ITT. We have legends of hare beings in Eastern Europe, one of them commented. They are said to guard ancient forest knowledge. Whistle chirp pop, a distant branch of the family, perhaps. The Addamses have intermarried with numerous unusual beings throughout history. Makes family reunions particularly exciting, never quite sure who might spontaneously molt or require blood sacrifices during dessert. Pansy made a choking sound and turned away, clearly regretting her question. As dinner progressed, ITT regaled the table with increasingly outlandish tales of the Addams family history, each more bizarre than the last. To Harry's surprise, the Durmstrang students were completely enthralled, asking questions and sharing their own strange magical traditions. Even Malfoy, despite his initial hostility, seemed unable to tear himself away from ITT stories, particularly those involving ancient pureblood families and their darker secrets. Whistle Chirp Pop, the Blacks, for instance, related to the Malfoys through your mother, young Draco, had a fascinating curse on their family tapestry. Anyone removed from it would experience minor but persistent misfortunes involving undergarments. Completely petty but remarkably effective as a deterrent against family disloyalty. Malfoy looked startled. How would you know about the Black family tapestry? Chirp Whistle Pop, Walburga Black attended Grandmama's hemlock wine tasting in the summer of '62. Became quite chatty after the third glass. She and Morticia corresponded for years regarding innovative household curses. We still use her recipe for shrinking doorways when unwelcome guests overstay their welcome. By the time the Weird Sisters took the stage for the evening's main entertainment, an extraordinary thing had happened. ITT had somehow charmed nearly everyone at the table, even reluctant Slytherins. They moved to the dance floor as a peculiar but unified group. The Weird Sisters struck up a fast, energetic number, and the dance floor filled quickly. ITT, who had been relatively restrained during the formal opening dance, now displayed what must have been their true dancing style, a whirling, twirling explosion of hair and movement that somehow stayed perfectly in rhythm while defying several laws of physics. Students cleared a space around ITT, watching in amazement as the hair being performed increasingly spectacular moves. When the lead singer of the Weird Sisters noticed, he actually pointed ITT out to the crowd, and cheers erupted. Chirp Whistle Pop, dance is the physical expression of the soul's darkest desires, Cousin Harry. Join me. Before Harry could object, ITT had pulled him into the performance. To his own shock, Harry found himself caught up in the moment, dancing with an abandon he'd never felt before. It didn't matter that he wasn't particularly skilled, ITT's exuberance was contagious, and soon they were surrounded by applauding students. When the song ended, the lead singer of the Weird Sisters actually beckoned to ITT. "Get up here, you magnificent hairy thing," he called into his magical microphone. "Anyone who can dance like that deserves a spot on stage." To Harry's astonishment, ITT glided up to the stage and was handed a strange, curved instrument that looked vaguely like a cross between a saxophone and a set of bagpipes. Whistle Chirp Pop, this is a traditional Addams family instrument, the Screaming Sorrow Pipe. May I? The band nodded, intrigued, and ITT began to play. The sound that emerged was unlike anything Harry had ever heard, hauntingly beautiful yet slightly disturbing, like a chorus of ghostly voices singing from beyond the veil. The Weird Sisters quickly adapted, finding a rhythm that complemented ITT's unusual melody. The resulting music had students swaying in a near trance, couples holding each other closer, eyes closed as they moved to the otherworldly sounds. "Your cousin is full of surprises," came Hermione's voice beside Harry. She and Krum had appeared next to him, both looking flushed from dancing. "That's putting it mildly," Harry replied, watching in amazement as ITT performed what appeared to be a solo on the strange instrument, hair flowing dramatically with each movement. "Is normal for American wizards to be so unusual?" Krum asked, his thick eyebrows drawn together in fascination. "I don't think anything about the Addamses is normal by any standard," Harry said. After ITT's impromptu musical performance, which earned thunderous applause from the entire hall, the evening took on a dreamlike quality. ITT moved through the crowd like a celebrity, students approaching to compliment the music, ask questions about America, or simply stare in fascination. Even Professor McGonagall seemed to have warmed to ITT's presence, actually requesting a dance, which ITT performed with such formal precision and old-world charm that several students stopped to watch. Chirp Whistle Pop, Professor, you dance divinely. The Scottish have always had a wonderful appreciation for the macabre. Your traditional funeral dirges bring tears to Adam's eyes. McGonagall actually smiled. My grandfather was known for his laments, Mr. ITT. Few appreciate the artistry in proper mourning music these days. As midnight approached, Harry found himself sitting at a table with Ron, who looked decidedly grumpy despite his improved dress robes. His date, Padma Patil, had abandoned him for a Beauxbatons boy after Ron refused to dance. Having fun? Harry asked, taking a break from the constant social whirlwind that accompanied ITT. Bloody waste of an evening, Ron muttered. Hermione's been with Krum all night. Ah, so that was the problem. They do seem to be getting along well, Harry observed, spotting them slow dancing across the hall. He's from Durmstrang. Ron hissed. Their school practically teaches the dark arts. Before Harry could respond, ITT appeared beside them, somehow looking perfectly groomed despite hours of energetic dancing and musical performance. Chirp whistle pop, young Ronald. Why the funereal expression? This is a celebration. Not feeling very celebratory, Ron grumbled. Whistle chirp pop, ah, the distinct aura of jealousy and wounded pride. An Adam's favorite. Nothing spices up a ball like unrequited emotions and simmering resentment. Ron turned red. I'm not jealous. Chirp whistle pop, of course not. And I'm not covered in hair. We all have our delusions, dear boy. The question is, what will you do about yours? Adamses believe in action, not sulking. When Great-Uncle Vlad wanted to court Cousin Ravina, he didn't mope when she was seeing the local vampire count. He challenged him to a blood-drinking contest and won her heart by nearly draining himself to death. Romance. Harry couldn't help laughing at the horrified expression on Ron's face. That's mental, Ron said. I'm not nearly dying to impress Hermione. Whistle chirp pop, perhaps not, but sitting here scowling accomplishes even less. The night is young. There are still opportunities for dramatic gestures, shocking confessions, or at minimum, one good dance. With surprising strength, ITT pulled Ron to his feet. Chirp whistle pop, come. The Addams family has a tradition of helping the romantically inept. It's practically our charitable work. Before Ron could protest further, ITT had dragged him toward the dance floor, leaving Harry alone at the table. He watched in amazement as ITT somehow maneuvered Ron into a group dance that happened to include Hermione and Krum, positioning Ron directly opposite Hermione. Your cousin is quite the social choreographer, came a dreamy voice beside him. Luna Lovegood had appeared in the seat Ron had vacated, wearing spangled silver robes that matched her wide, silvery eyes. I'm starting to see that, Harry agreed. Are you enjoying the ball, Luna? Oh yes, she said serenely. The music attracted several dirigible plums from the greenhouse. They're floating above the dance floor, invisible to most people. Your cousin can see them, though. I noticed ITT nodding to them earlier. Harry wasn't sure how to respond to that. Right. Glad you're having a good time. Your cousin isn't what everyone thinks, you know, Luna continued, her gaze following ITT across the dance floor. Most people see hair and strangeness, but that's just the outer layer. What do you see? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Luna smiled her dreamy smile. Family magic. Old and deep and neither light nor dark but something else entirely. Daddy would call it, primal magic, the kind that existed before wizards started categorizing everything. Harry looked at ITT with new eyes. He'd been so caught up in the surface strangeness that he hadn't really considered what ITT might actually be in magical terms. Do you think ITT is dangerous? He found himself asking. Luna considered this seriously. All the best things are dangerous in the right circumstances, Harry. A wand is dangerous. Love is dangerous. Even a book can be dangerous. But that doesn't mean we should avoid them. With that peculiar bit of Luna wisdom, she drifted away toward the refreshment table, leaving Harry to ponder her words. As the ball began winding down in the early hours of the morning, ITT found Harry again. Chirp whistle pop, a magnificent evening, Cousin Harry. You've shown me true hospitality and introduced me to your world. Tomorrow, I shall repay the favor by helping you with your little egg problem. Harry started. My egg problem? How do you know about that? Whistle chirp pop, the Addams family has exceptional hearing, particularly for the sounds of torment. Your golden egg's screaming is quite distinctive, reminiscent of the Bavarian shrieking eel's great-aunt Drusilla used to breed in the moat. You can understand what it's saying? Harry asked, hope rising. He'd been completely stumped by the ear-splitting wail that emerged whenever he opened the egg. Chirp whistle pop, not precisely, but I recognize the acoustic signature. Water-based communications have a particular resonance. We'll solve it together tomorrow, family helping family. As they walked back toward Gryffindor Tower, ITT insisting on escorting Harry safely back despite having quarters in the opposite direction, Harry felt a strange sense of contentment. The evening that he had dreaded had turned out to be one of the most memorable nights of his life. Thank you, Harry said simply as they reached the portrait of the fat lady. Not just for coming to the ball, but for everything. Chirp whistle pop, family is everything, Harry Potter. James and Lily would be proud of the young wizard you've become. Different from both the Potters and the Addamses in your own ways, but carrying the best of both bloodlines. ITT reached out a hair-covered hand and gently touched the locket beneath Harry's robes. Whistle chirp pop, remember, the connections we forge are stronger than any magic. The Addamses are your family too, now and always. Distance means nothing to those who share blood, or hair. With a final chirp that needed no translation, ITT turned and glided away down the corridor, tiny top hat still perfectly balanced on the mass of flowing hair. As Harry gave the password to the fat lady, who was looking rather misty-eyed after witnessing their exchange, he realized that his impulsive letter had given him something he'd always wanted, a connection to family that actually felt like family. The Yule Ball had been transformed from a dreaded ordeal into the beginning of something new. And tomorrow, apparently, Cousin ITT would help him tackle the golden egg clue. With an Addams on his side, Harry had a feeling the remaining Triwizard tasks might not be quite so daunting after all. Chapter 2, The heir apparent. Harry woke the next morning with his ears still ringing from the Weird Sisters' final set and his feet aching from more dancing than he'd ever done in his life. Sunlight streamed through a gap in his bed curtains, revealing a dormitory full of still sleeping boys who had clearly enjoyed the ball well into the early hours. Ron's loud snores punctuated the peaceful morning quiet. Harry's hand drifted to the silver locket still hanging around his neck, ITT's Christmas gift. It felt warm against his skin, almost like it had a pulse of its own. The events of last night seemed dreamlike in the cold light of morning. Had he really danced in front of the entire school with his cousin who was essentially a walking pile of hair? Had ITT really played a bizarre instrument on stage with the Weird Sisters? Good morning, Cousin Harry. The cheerful chirps came through ITT's magical translation orb, which now hovered at the foot of Harry's bed, making him jump so violently he cracked his head on the headboard. Merlins, Harry yelped, then lowered his voice to a whisper. ITT? How did you get in here? Again. ITT stood beside his bed, still wearing the formal top hat from last night, though the tuxedo had been replaced with what appeared to be a smoking jacket made of some shimmery material. Chirp whistle pop, the fat lady and I have come to an understanding. I complimented her vocal range, and she's agreed that passwords are merely suggestions for those with proper artistic appreciation. Harry groaned. McGonagall would have kittens if she found out the Gryffindor security had been compromised by a charming hairball. What time is it? Harry asked, reaching for his glasses. Chirp whistle pop, merely 7:30. A glorious Boxing Day morning. In the Addams household, we'd traditionally be hunting rare winter mushrooms in the cemetery by now, but I thought you might prefer to start with breakfast before we tackle your egg conundrum. Ron's bed curtains flew open. "Did someone say breakfast?" he mumbled, his hair sticking up in every direction. Then he spotted ITT and nearly fell out of bed. "Bloody hell. Do you ever make normal entrances?" Whistle chirp pop, normal entrances are for those with nothing to announce, young Ronald. Besides, I bring news. The entire school is abuzz with last night's festivities. Apparently, our performance has made us minor celebrities. Us? Harry asked warily. Chirp whistle pop, indeed. Potter and the Harry sensation, is what I heard two Hufflepuffs call us as they passed me in the corridor. I've been up for hours exploring the castle. The suits of armor are particularly chatty if you oil their joints correctly. Harry and Ron exchanged looks. Right, Harry said, climbing out of bed and reaching for his clothes. Let's get breakfast, and then you can tell me about this egg solution you mentioned. By the time they made it to the Great Hall, Harry realized ITT wasn't exaggerating about their newfound celebrity status. Heads turned as they entered, and several students actually applauded. The Weird Sisters' lead singer, who was apparently staying at Hogwarts for the holidays, waved enthusiastically from the staff table where he sat beside Dumbledore. "What in Merlin's name did you two do after I went to bed?" Ron whispered as they made their way to the Gryffindor table. "Nothing that," Harry began, but he was cut off by Fred and George swooping down on them. "The men of the hour," George announced, slapping Harry on the back. "The hair of the hour, more like," Fred added, offering what might have been a bow to ITT. "Your midnight encore performance was legendary." "Encore?" Harry looked at ITT. "What encore?" Chirp whistle pop, yes. "After you retired, Cousin Harry, the festivities continued. The Weird Sisters invited me back for their final set. We improvised a little number I call, Screams of the Ancestors. Quite popular with the older students. ITT played that weird pipe thing again," Fred explained. "Made half the girls cry and the other half fall in love. Even McGonagall looked misty-eyed. And then Professor Flitwick joined in with some kind of magical theremin," George continued. "It was brilliant chaos." Harry stared at ITT, who somehow managed to convey an air of modest pride despite having no visible facial features. Whistle chirp pop, music transcends species, language, and conventional classification systems. It's the universal magic. As they sat down to breakfast, Harry noticed that students from all houses kept glancing their way. Even more surprisingly, several professors nodded to ITT with what looked like newfound respect. "I think you've been officially adopted by Hogwarts," Harry said, helping himself to bacon. Chirp whistle pop, a charming institution, despite its concerning lack of sentient carnivorous plants and man-eating staircases. The Adams Academy in Massachusetts takes a more Darwinian approach to education. Survival is considered a core subject rather than a happy byproduct. Ron choked on his pumpkin juice. "There's an Adams School of Magic." Whistle chirp pop, not exclusively magic, we believe in comprehensive education that includes potion brewing alongside tax evasion, ballroom dancing alongside sword fighting, and necromancy as an extracurricular activity. Hermione arrived then, looking fresh-faced despite the late night. "Good morning," she said brightly, sitting down beside Ron. "Everyone's talking about you too." "So we've heard," Harry said. "Apparently ITT gave an encore performance after I went to bed." "It was incredible," Hermione confirmed. "I've never heard music like that." Victor said it reminded him of traditional Bulgarian funeral dirges, but more uplifting. Chirp whistle pop, the highest compliment. Funeral music should always leave one feeling invigorated about mortality. What's the point of contemplating death if it doesn't make you embrace life more fervently? As breakfast continued, a rustle of wings announced the morning owl post. Harry wasn't expecting anything, so he was surprised when a sleek eagle owl landed in front of him, bearing an official-looking envelope. "That's a ministry owl," Ron said, eyeing it warily. Harry opened the letter with some trepidation. After scanning it quickly, he looked up with confusion. It's from the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. They want to interview Cousin ITT? Chirp whistle pop, bureaucracy strikes again. This happens whenever I visit Britain officially. The ministry becomes quite agitated about creatures they cannot classify. The Addams family lawyer handles these inquiries with a standard form letter explaining that I am protected under 17 international magical treaties and the right to Harry Arms clause of the 1832 Geneva Convention. That doesn't sound like a real clause, Hermione said skeptically. Whistle chirp pop, it isn't. But by the time they research that, I'm usually back in America, and they file me under too much paperwork to pursue. Harry handed the letter to ITT. Should we be worried? Chirp whistle pop, not at all. Bureaucratic interest is a sign of cultural impact. Besides, I have diplomatic immunity in most magical jurisdictions due to an incident in 1923 involving 3 supreme mugwumps, a nest of alchemy eggs, and my great-aunt Belladonna's experimental hair tonic. The details remain classified, but the result was a blanket agreement to leave Addamses alone unless we're actively causing international incidents. Are you actively causing international incidents? Hermione asked, looking both concerned and fascinated. Whistle chirp pop, not currently. Though the day is young. The arrival of the Daily Prophet caused the next stir. Rita Skeeter had apparently worked through the night to produce a front-page article with the screaming headline, Potter's Harry Situation, Triwizard Champion imports mysterious creature for Yule Ball. Romance. Below was a photograph of Harry and ITT dancing, ITT's hair flowing dramatically as they twirled across the floor. The article itself was classic Rita, in a shocking display that left students and staff alike questioning both his judgment and possibly his sanity. Harry Potter, 14, controversial Triwizard Champion, attended the traditional Yule Ball with what witnesses describe as a sentient hairball in formal wear. The creature, which Potter claims is his cousin through an alleged American branch of the Potter family, calls itself ITT and communicates through unintelligible squeaks and whistles. It's clearly some kind of magical creature he's enchanted, said Pansy Parkinson, 14, a pretty Slytherin student. Potter was so desperate for attention that he couldn't just bring a normal date like everyone else. However, sources close to this reporter indicate that the creature may in fact be connected to the infamous Addams clan, a notoriously eccentric American family whose magical status has long been questioned by international regulatory bodies. The Addams family has been linked to numerous unexplained magical phenomena, including spontaneous weather changes, resurrections of questionable legality, and a peculiar mansion in New York that appears to violate several fundamental laws of magical architecture. If Potter is truly related to the Addams family, this raises serious concerns about his own magical heritage, commented a ministry source who requested anonymity. The boy's connection to multiple unusual magical occurrences over his years at Hogwarts takes on new significance in light of this relationship. Albus Dumbledore, Hogwarts headmaster and known eccentric, appeared delighted by the disruption, even allowing the creature to perform with the musical entertainment. Diversity of magical beings enriches our community, Dumbledore stated when questioned about the propriety of allowing an unclassified entity to attend a school function. The ministry's Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures has reportedly opened an inquiry. Readers can rest assured that the Daily Prophet will continue monitoring this Harry situation as it develops. Harry situation? Ron snorted. Even by Rita's standards, that's bad. Harry scanned the Great Hall, noticing the other students reading the article and glancing their way. To his surprise, many seemed amused rather than scandalized. Chirp whistle pop, delightful. Rita has perfectly captured the Addams approach to publicity, we prefer infamy to obscurity. Wait until Grandmama sees this, she collects sensationalist press about the family. Has a whole room wallpapered with headlines dating back to 1865. You're not upset? Harry asked. Whistle chirp pop, upset. This is marvelous. Notoriously eccentric is practically our family motto. Though she really should have mentioned my musical performance in more detail. Critics rarely appreciate avant-garde genius in their time. Before Harry could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Professor McGonagall, looking unusually flustered. "Mr. Potter, Mr. ITT," she said briskly. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately. It seems the ministry has taken an interest in yesterday's festivities." Harry's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of attention he didn't need with the Triwizard Tournament still looming over him. "Are we in trouble, Professor?" McGonagall's lips thinned. "Not precisely. But it appears that Madame Umbridge from the Ministry has taken personal interest in Mr. ITT's classification status. She's waiting in the headmaster's office." Chirp whistle pop, Dolores Umbridge. "How fascinating. We've crossed paths before, though she may not remember it. I attended a ministry function in 1987 where she attempted to have me forcibly removed as an unregistered being. The resulting litigation was most entertaining." McGonagall looked momentarily surprised. "You've encountered Madame Umbridge before?" Whistle chirp pop, "Oh yes. The Addams family has a long history of antagonizing bureaucrats who lack imagination. It's practically a hobby." As they followed McGonagall through the castle, Harry felt a growing sense of dread. "Is this going to be a problem?" he whispered to ITT. Chirp whistle pop, "Problems are merely opportunities wearing unconventional clothing, Cousin Harry. Besides, the ministry has been trying to classify me for generations. It's practically a tradition at this point, like Christmas, but with more paperwork." When they arrived at Dumbledore's office, they found an unusual assembly waiting for them. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, blue eyes twinkling as always. Beside him stood a squat woman with a wide, flabby face and bulging eyes that reminded Harry unpleasantly of a toad. She wore a fluffy pink cardigan that somehow made her look even more threatening. "Ah, Harry, Mr. ITT," Dumbledore greeted them cheerfully. "Thank you for joining us. May I introduce Madame Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister for Magic. She's here regarding, well, I'll let her explain." Umbridge stepped forward with a simpering smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hem. "Mr. Potter, I presume. And this, being, is the creature mentioned in this morning's prophet?" Chirp whistle pop, Cousin ITT of the Addams family, at your service, Madame Umbridge. "We met at the International Magical Cooperation Gala in '87. You were wearing a remarkably similar cardigan, though perhaps a shade pinker. Your attempt to have me classified as a non-human spirituous apparition was most creative, though legally unsound." Umbridge's face tightened. "I'm quite certain I would remember encountering such a distinctive entity." Whistle chirp pop, "You were rather preoccupied with trying to pass that legislation restricting werewolf employment." Cousin ITT gestured dismissively. "Bureaucrats tend to blur together after decades of attempted regulation. No offense taken." Harry bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing as Umbridge's face grew steadily pinker, nearly matching her cardigan. "The ministry," she said in a dangerously sweet voice, "has a duty to classify all magical beings within our jurisdiction. This ITT has attended an official function at a ministry-regulated educational institution without proper documentation or classification. I believe," Dumbledore interjected mildly, "that Mr. ITT was invited as a family guest of Mr. Potter for a school social function, not as an official representative requiring ministry approval. Unless we are now requiring genealogical verification for ball attendees. This is clearly not a human relative," Umbridge snapped, dropping her sweet facade momentarily. "The Prophet article suggests connections to the Addams family of America, a group the ministry has long monitored for potential violations of the International Statute of Secrecy." Chirp whistle pop, "The Addams family maintains excellent relations with MACUSA, Madame Umbridge. Our ancestral home exists in that delightful gray area between magical and mundane, too strange for muggles to accept as normal, yet too eccentric for most wizards to recognize as explicitly magical. We've elevated ambiguity to an art form." Umbridge's eyes narrowed. The creature speaks nonsense. On the contrary, Dumbledore said, I find Mr. ITT's explanation quite illuminating. The Addams family has indeed occupied a unique position in international magical relations for generations. Their unusual approach to magic falls outside conventional classification but has been accommodated through various international agreements. I am aware of no such agreements, Umbridge said stiffly. Whistle chirp pop, the Addams European Magical Cooperation Treaty of 1923, subsection 7, paragraph 13, any entity of Addams origin shall be granted temporary visitor status without requirement of specific magical classification when visiting for non-commercial, non-criminal purposes. Signed by your own Minister Lorcan MacLaird after the Luxembourg incident. Cousin ITT's hair rippled in what might have been amusement. Your Department of International Magical Cooperation keeps a copy in their restricted archives. Under 4. Avoid antagonizing. Harry stared at ITT. How did a being that appeared to be nothing but hair know so much about international magical law? Umbridge's face had grown steadily redder. Nevertheless, I am authorized to conduct an official classification assessment. The minister himself has expressed concern, chirp whistle pop, Minister Fudge. Lovely man. We played bridge together at the International Confederation of Wizards Summit in '91. He lost spectacularly, never could master a proper poker face. Send him my regards. Dumbledore coughed in a way that sounded suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. Perhaps, Dolores, we could set aside the classification question temporarily. Mr. ITT is here as Mr. Potter's guest for the holidays and will be returning to America shortly. Surely there's no harm in allowing this brief visit to continue without bureaucratic intervention. Umbridge looked like she wanted to object strenuously, but something in Dumbledore's pleasant expression gave her pause. Very well, she said finally. But I will be filing a formal report with the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. And I expect this visitor to depart British soil immediately after the holidays. Chirp whistle pop, naturally. I have a family gathering to attend for New Year's Eve. Great Aunt Drusilla is celebrating her 173rd birthday, or possibly her death day, the records are somewhat ambiguous. Either way, there will be cake. After a few more thinly veiled threats from Umbridge and reassurances from Dumbledore, they were finally dismissed. As they descended the spiral staircase from Dumbledore's office, Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was intense, he said. Is the Ministry always trying to classify you? Chirp whistle pop, only when I make myself known officially. I've visited Britain dozens of times incognito, wonderful museums, excellent cemeteries. But as soon as the Addams name appears in official contexts, bureaucrats become agitated. We found it's best to confuse them with obscure treaties and legal precedents until they give up. Harry shook his head in amazement. I can't believe you know all those laws and treaties off the top of your, hair. Whistle chirp pop, the Addams family has excellent lawyers. We have to, half our recreational activities exist in legal gray areas. Now, about that golden egg. They collected Ron and Hermione from the Great Hall and made their way to the Gryffindor Common Room, which was nearly empty with most students still sleeping off the ball. Harry retrieved the golden egg from his trunk and set it on the table. Every time I open it, it just wails, he explained to ITT. I can't make out any clue in the noise. Chirp whistle pop, let's hear it, then. Harry twisted the top of the egg, and it fell open, revealing nothing but empty space inside. Immediately, a horrible screeching filled the room, like a chorus of banshees being tortured. He quickly snapped it shut again. Bloody hell, Ron muttered, fingers in his ears. That's even worse than I remembered. ITT, however, had gone completely still, the hair-covered head tilted to one side in what seemed like concentration. Chirp whistle pop, fascinating. The acoustic signature is unmistakable, that's Mermish. Mermish? Hermione repeated. You mean the language of mere people? Whistle chirp pop, precisely. Merfolk speech sounds like that screeching when heard above water. Below water, it transforms into hauntingly beautiful melody. The Addams family learned this during the Great Mermaid dinner party disaster of 1892, terribly awkward affair, but educationally valuable. Harry stared at the egg with new understanding. So I need to listen to it underwater? Chirp whistle pop, indeed. Though I can translate the general message for you now if you'd prefer. My hair is particularly receptive to unusual frequencies, acts as a natural sound filter. You understood that screaming? Ron asked incredulously. Whistle chirp pop, only partially. But enough to recognize it as a riddle about something precious being taken and held beneath the Black Lake, with a time limit of 1 hour for retrieval. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged startled looks. The second task involves the lake? Harry asked. Chirp whistle pop, almost certainly. The Merfolk colony in your Black Lake will be holding something you value, traditional Mermish challenge format. You'll need to retrieve it within the hour time limit. But how am I supposed to breathe underwater for an hour? Harry asked, alarm growing as he contemplated the frigid February waters of the Black Lake. Whistle chirp pop, so many options. Gillyweed is traditional, Mediterranean water plant that temporarily grants aquatic adaptations. Bubblehead charm works too, though less elegant. The Addams family prefers partial transfiguration, webbed fingers are so practical for family swims in the mansion moat. Hermione was already mentally cataloging information. I'll start researching underwater breathing methods in the library. We should compare options for reliability. Chirp whistle pop, a prudent approach. Though I'd recommend practical testing before the actual task. The Addams children learned to swim in our piranha-infested pool specifically to develop quick adaptation to underwater challenges. Harry shuddered at the thought of an Addams family swimming lesson. I think I'll stick with normal practice methods, but thanks. Would you like to confirm the egg's message? Hermione asked. We could take it to the prefect's bathroom, it has a large enough tub to submerge the egg properly. Excellent idea. ITT agreed through the translation orb. I have a particular interest in advanced plumbing systems. The Addams mansion has pipes that have developed sentience over the centuries, makes for exciting bath times. That afternoon found them sneaking into the prefect's bathroom under Harry's invisibility cloak, with ITT somehow managing to compress all that hair to fit underneath. The password Percy had inadvertently revealed to Harry, Pine Fresh, granted them access to the magnificent bathroom with its swimming pool-sized tub and 100 golden taps. Chirp whistle pop, charming. Though it could use more gargoyles. And perhaps jets of alternating boiling and freezing water, so invigorating for the circulation. As the enormous tub filled with warm water and multicolored bubbles, Harry couldn't help feeling slightly awkward. He hadn't planned on having an audience for this. I'm just going to put the egg in the water, he said. I don't need to actually get in, right? Whistle chirp pop, for optimal sound quality, full immersion is recommended. The Mermish vibrations resonate most clearly when both the listener and the sound source are underwater. Harry grimaced but nodded. Right. I'll keep my clothes on, then. Don't be ridiculous, Harry, Hermione said practically. Your robes will soak up half the water and be dreadfully heavy. Just get in with your underwear. Ron's ears turned pink at Hermione's matter-of-fact tone, but Harry reluctantly agreed. He stripped down to his boxers, acutely aware of ITT watching with what seemed like amused interest, though it was impossible to tell with no visible face. Chirp whistle pop, human modesty is endlessly fascinating. Addamses rarely concern themselves with such conventions. Uncle Fester regularly receives guests while taking his weekly acid bath. That's nice, Harry muttered, quickly slipping into the bubbly water. The warm bath was actually quite pleasant, despite the awkward circumstances. He took the golden egg from Hermione and looked at ITT. So I just open it underwater? Whistle chirp pop, correct. And you'll need to submerge your head to hear properly. I'll join you. Mermish has regional dialects, and I may catch nuances you miss. Before anyone could object, ITT had somehow slipped out of the smoking jacket and was sliding into the water, hair floating outward like a strange amber jellyfish. Wait, won't you get all soggy? Ron asked, looking horrified at the thought of wet hair clogging the prefect's drain. Chirp whistle pop, Adam's hair is naturally water-resistant. A evolutionary adaptation from the family's bogland origins in prehistoric times. Harry decided not to pursue that disturbing genealogical revelation. Ready? He asked, holding the egg just below the water's surface. Whistle chirp pop, proceed. Harry took a deep breath, submerged completely, and opened the egg. Instead of the horrible screeching, a beautiful chorus of eerie voices sang into the watery silence. Come seek us where our voices sound, we cannot sing above the ground, and while you're searching ponder this, we've taken what you'll sorely miss, an hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took, but past an hour, the prospect's black, too late, it's gone, it won't come back. Harry surfaced, gasping, to find ITT already up and the translation orb hovering just above the water. Chirp whistle pop, Scottish Mermish dialect, Northwest Colony variation. Just as I thought, they'll take something valuable from you and hide it in their village at the bottom of the lake. You'll have 1 hour to retrieve it before it's lost forever, though that last part is typically Mermish dramatic flair. They rarely keep hostages permanently. Typically. Rarely. Hermione repeated with alarm. You mean sometimes they do? Whistle chirp pop, there was an unfortunate incident during the 1871 Triwizard Tournament held at Durmstrang. The merfolk of the Baltic are rather more traditional in their approach to challenge failures. The champion's younger brother spent 3 years as an honored guest of the colony before diplomatic negotiations secured his return. Harry felt his stomach twist. They wouldn't actually keep whatever they take, would they? Not at Hogwarts. Chirp whistle pop, almost certainly not. Modern magical cooperation agreements have greatly improved interspecies relations. Though it's worth noting that the thing they take will likely be a person, not an object. A person? Harry repeated, horrified. Whistle chirp pop, traditional Mermish hostage challenges involve living treasures. What you'll sorely miss typically refers to an emotionally significant person. Much more dramatic than a favorite quill or chocolate frog card. Harry climbed out of the tub, suddenly feeling vulnerable. So they're going to kidnap someone important to me and stick them at the bottom of the lake. That's mental. Chirp whistle pop, oh, they'll be perfectly safe, suspended in magical stasis until retrieved or until the challenge concludes. Merpeople are excellent hostage takers, they've refined the art over millennia. The Addams family once hired a mermaid colony for a birthday celebration. The Find Your Favorite Relative Before They Run Out of Air game was the highlight of Great Uncle Vlad's 115th birthday. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged alarmed glances as they gathered their things and prepared to leave the bathroom. Sounds like we need to focus on finding the best underwater breathing method, Hermione said practically. I'll start researching options in the library. Chirp whistle pop, a wise approach. Though practical experimentation is equally important. The Black Lake in January presents unique challenges beyond mere breathing, hypothermia, limited visibility, grindylows, and of course, the giant squid's territorial nature during mating season. Mating season? Ron squeaked. Whistle chirp pop, January through March. They become particularly frisky around Valentine's Day. The Addams family keeps a similar species in our swamp, wonderfully affectionate creatures if approached correctly. As they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower under the invisibility cloak, a tight fit with 4 of them, even with ITT compressed, Harry's mind raced with this new information. The second task now seemed even more daunting than the first. Dragons were terrifying, certainly, but at least they were a known threat. The mysterious depths of the Black Lake, with merpeople kidnapping someone he cared about, that presented an entirely different kind of challenge. Whistle chirp pop, don't look so grim, Cousin Harry. Underwater rescue missions are a splendid opportunity for heroics. And the lake's winter temperature makes for excellent cardiovascular conditioning. Your heart will either strengthen tremendously or stop entirely. Educational either way. That's not helping, ITT, Harry muttered. Whistle chirp pop, perspective, dear boy. Adamses believe that mortal peril is the spice that gives life flavor. Without occasional brushes with death, how would you appreciate the exquisite joy of survival? When they reached the common room, they found it more populated than earlier, with students finally emerging from post-ball slumber. Conversation stopped as ITT entered, then immediately resumed with increased volume and excited gestures in their direction. Your fame grows, cousin ITT, Harry said dryly. Chirp whistle pop, fame is merely the universe's acknowledgement of appropriate strangeness. The Addams family cultivates it like others tend gardens, with regular feeding of public curiosity and occasional dramatic pruning of unwanted attention. Before Harry could respond, Colin Creevey bounded up to them, camera in hand. Harry! Harry! Can I get a photo of you and your amazing cousin for the school paper? Everyone's talking about the ball performance. School paper? Harry asked, confused. Hogwarts doesn't have a newspaper. It does now. Colin said excitedly. After Rita Skeeter's article this morning, a bunch of us decided Hogwarts needs its own news source to tell the real story. We're calling it, the Hogwarts Herald, and our first issue is going to feature cousin ITT's visit. Chirp whistle pop, how delightful. The Addams family fully supports independent journalism. Grandmama ran an underground newsletter for 3 years during the Goblin Rebellion of 1893, The Pointed Truth, it was called. Circulation of 17, but 11 of those were high-ranking goblins. Colin beamed. So can I get a photo? Maybe one with ITT playing that amazing instrument from last night? Whistle chirp pop, certainly. Though be warned, Addamses sometimes develop unusual properties in magical photographs. Cousin Phantom once caused an entire gallery of portraits to evacuate their frames after his image was captured with a particularly powerful flash. Colin looked momentarily uncertain but rallied quickly. That would be amazing. The more unusual, the better for our first issue. After a brief but chaotic photo session in which ITT demonstrated the screaming sorrow pipe for Colin's camera, causing several younger students to flee the common room with hands over their ears, Harry finally had a chance to sit down with Ron and Hermione to discuss the second task more seriously. We've got a month until February 24th, Hermione said, already making notes on a piece of parchment. That should be enough time to research and practice the best method for underwater breathing. Gillyweed seems like the simplest option, Harry said, remembering ITT's suggestion. But where would I get it? Chirp whistle pop, Professor Snape undoubtedly has some in his private stores. Mediterranean water plants are standard components in advanced transformative potions. Ron snorted. Great, so Harry just needs to break into Snape's private supplies. I'm sure that would go over brilliantly. Whistle chirp pop, breaking in is so unimaginative. The Addams approach would be direct negotiation, offer something uniquely valuable in exchange. Everyone has a price, even dour potions masters with inexplicable haircare regimens. What could I possibly offer Snape? Harry asked skeptically. Chirp whistle pop, I noticed his particular interest in certain dark detection methods during last night's conversations at the ball. The Addams family has several proprietary techniques that might interest a potions master of his caliber. I could negotiate on your behalf, a cultural exchange of knowledge for resources. Harry tried to imagine Snape willingly helping him in any way and failed. I appreciate the offer, but I think we should look for alternatives first. The bubblehead charm is another option, Hermione suggested. It's an EWT level, but the theory isn't overly complicated. Chirp whistle pop, a functional but inelegant solution. Limits peripheral vision and makes you look like your head is encased in a fishbowl. Though the Addams children find it useful for visiting particularly noxious relatives in their crypts. What about transfiguration? Ron asked. Could you turn yourself partly into a fish or something? Self-transfiguration is incredibly dangerous, Hermione said immediately. One small mistake and you could be stuck with gills and no way to reverse it. Whistle chirp pop, a valid concern, though not necessarily a deterrent. Great Uncle Fester spent 3 months with tentacles after a minor transfiguration mishap. Found them so useful for multitasking that he was reluctant to change back. As they debated options, the portrait hole opened to reveal Professor McGonagall. Her eyes swept the common room until they landed on their group. Mr. ITT, she said crisply, Professor Hagrid has requested your presence at his cabin. Something about the Beauxbatons horses being unusually agitated in your presence yesterday, and he wondered if you might shed some light on the matter. Chirp whistle pop, ah, the lovely Abraxans. Magnificent creatures with excellent taste. I'd be delighted to consult. We'll come too, Harry said quickly, not entirely trusting ITT unsupervised with Hagrid. The combination seemed potentially catastrophic. McGonagall nodded. As you wish. Though I warn you, Hagrid's enthusiasm for Mr. ITT's unique qualities has been quite pronounced since their meeting. They bundled up against the winter chill and made their way across the snowy grounds to Hagrid's cabin. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and Fong's booming bark greeted them as they approached. Hagrid flung the door open before they could knock. There ya are, he boomed, beaming at ITT with undisguised fascination. Come in, come in. Just made some tea. Inside, the cabin was warm and cozy, though Harry noticed an unusual number of books spread across Hagrid's table, all apparently relating to magical creature classification. Been readin' up, Hagrid explained, following Harry's gaze. Never seen anything quite like ya before, Mr. ITT. Fascinatin', really. Can't figure where yet fit in the Ministry classification system. Chirp whistle pop, a puzzle that has confounded regulatory bodies for generations. The Addams family defies conventional taxonomy, neither fully human nor beast nor spirit, but perhaps something of all three. We prefer to think of ourselves as taxonomically transcendent. Hagrid looked delighted. That's exactly what I thought. Tried tellin' Professor Grubbly-Plank, but she just said I was obsessin' over another dangerous creature. Whistle chirp pop, the most interesting beings are always considered dangerous by the unimaginative. The Addams family considers, potentially lethal, to be a compliment of the highest order. Hagrid nodded enthusiastically, as though ITT had articulated his life philosophy perfectly. Exactly. Now, about them Beauxbatons horses, they got all worked up when ya walked past the paddock yesterday. Not scared like, mind ya. More, excited. Madame Maxime was right puzzled by it. Chirp whistle pop, Abraxan horses have exceptional magical sensitivity. The Addams family hair contains trace elements of certain rare magical substances, accumulated over generations of exposure to unusual environments. Likely they detected something familiar and responded to it. Could we see them? Harry asked, curious now. That's why I asked ya down, Hagrid said, standing and reaching for his moleskin coat. Thought we might see what happens with a proper introduction. Never seen Abraxans behave quite this way before. They trudged through the snow to the paddock near the Beauxbatons carriage, where the enormous Palomino flying horses were sheltered. As they approached, the horses immediately began to stir, tossing their heads and making soft nickering sounds in ITT's direction. Remarkable, Hermione breathed. They're definitely responding to you, ITT. Chirp whistle pop, Abraxans originated in the same mountainous regions of France where the Addams family maintained a summer chateau during the 17th century. Family legend suggests a certain intermingling of bloodlines during that period. Intermingling? Ron repeated with alarm. You don't mean? Whistle chirp pop, great-great-grandmother Desdemona had unusual taste in companions. The family portrait from that era shows her with what appears to be an unusually hirsute stallion frequently at her side. The genealogical records are deliberately vague. Harry wasn't sure whether to be horrified or fascinated. Are you saying you're part horse? Chirp whistle pop, taxonomic ambiguity is an Addams family tradition. We contain multitudes, some more equine than others. As they reached the paddock fence, the largest Abraxan, a magnificent stallion with intelligent eyes, approached ITT directly. To everyone's astonishment, it bowed its massive head, then extended its muzzle toward ITT's hair. Chirp whistle pop, ah, they recognize family magic. How charming. ITT extended what appeared to be a hand from within the mass of hair and gently stroked the horse's nose. The Abraxan made a sound almost like a purr, utterly unlike its usual whinny, and pressed closer. Blimey, Hagrid whispered reverently. Never seen anything like it. They don't usually take to strangers at all. Whistle chirp pop, not strangers, distant cousins reunited. The magic of blood recognizes itself across species boundaries. The other horses had now gathered at the fence, all focused intently on ITT. To Harry's amazement, ITT began making a series of chirping sounds different from his usual speech, higher pitched and more musical. The translation orb remained silent, but the horses clearly understood, responding with soft nickers and head tosses. "You can talk to them?" Hagrid asked, looking like Christmas had come again. Chirp whistle pop, not precisely talking, more like ancestral memory communication. The Addams family develops unusual linguistic capabilities after prolonged exposure to magical creatures. My great-aunt Belladonna could speak fluent Mermish, Troll, and 3 dialects of gobbledygook, though her Parseltongue had a regrettable accent that caused several diplomatic incidents with Cobra ambassadors. After several minutes of this strange communication, ITT turned back to them. Whistle chirp pop, they've shared some interesting information about the lake. Apparently, the Mare people have been particularly active lately, preparing their village for some special event, almost certainly your second task. The horses fly over the lake regularly and have observed unusual patterns of movement. Did they say anything else useful? Harry asked eagerly. Chirp whistle pop, they mentioned the giant squid has been more territorial than usual, consistent with mating season behavior. Also, something about increased Grindylow activity near the western shore. Useful tactical information for planning your approach to the village. Hagrid looked like he might burst with excitement. This is incredible. "D'ya think ye could teach me some that communication method? For me classes, ye understand." Whistle chirp pop, the basic principles can be taught, though the Addams physiological adaptations take generations to develop fully. Still, I'd be happy to share some techniques before I depart. By the time they returned to the castle, word of ITT's strange communion with the Abraxans had somehow preceded them. Harry was beginning to suspect that Hogwarts itself was accelerating the gossip. The castle's magical nature seemed to ensure that interesting news traveled at impossible speeds. "There's Potter and the Hair Monster," came Draco Malfoy's drawling voice as they entered the entrance hall. He stood with his usual gang of Slytherins, clearly waiting for their return. Having a cozy family reunion with the half-breed's beasts. Chirp whistle pop, young Malfoy. Still fixating on bloodlines, I see. How charmingly predictable. Did you ever ask your father about that poker debt? The Addamses are quite interested in collecting. We've recently renovated our dungeon playroom and find ourselves short 1 platinum-haired aristocrat for the testing phase. Malfoy's face drained of what little color it had. My father would never associate with, whatever you are. Whistle chirp pop, your family history contains more interesting chapters than you've been told, young man. The Malfoy-Black-Addams connection goes back further than you might imagine. Your great-grandmother's portrait hangs in our East Wing gallery, though we had to silence it after the unfortunate incident with the cursed scissors and talking ravens. Malfoy looked genuinely disturbed now. You're lying. Whistle chirp pop, Addamses never lie about genealogy, too many entertaining skeletons in our collective closets to need fabrication. Ask your mother about the Black family's American connection sometime. Her reaction should prove, illuminating. Crabbe and Goyle shifted uncomfortably, while Pansy Parkinson looked between Malfoy and ITT with growing uncertainty. "You know what I think?" Malfoy said, recovering his composure. "I think Potter's so desperate for family he's latched onto any freak that claims a connection." Pathetic, really. Harry felt a surge of anger, but before he could respond, ITT made an odd sound, like a soft, dangerous chuckle. "Chirp whistle pop, family comes in many forms, young Malfoy. The Adamses have learned over centuries that blood connections pale in comparison to the bonds forged through shared values and experiences. Harry may have only recently discovered his Adams heritage, but he's shown more family spirit in days than some show in lifetimes of impeccable breeding." ITT's hair seemed to expand slightly, the individual strands moving subtly like they were charged with electricity. "Whistle chirp pop, mock our connection if you wish, but remember, those who disrespect Adam's family bonds have historically experienced rather creative misfortunes. Not curses, precisely. More like cosmic irony with unusually precise targeting." Something in ITT's tone, or perhaps the way the torchlight suddenly dimmed around them, made even Malfoy step back. "Whatever," he muttered, clearly trying to save face. "Come on," he said to his friends, "let's leave Potter and his pet mop to their freak show." As the Slytherins retreated, Ron whistled low. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, ITT." Chirp whistle pop, Adamses don't have bad sides, merely degrees of creative enthusiasm regarding consequences. Young Malfoy will discover that soon enough. "What did you mean about his family connection to yours?" Hermione asked curiously. "Whistle chirp pop, old magical families are all interconnected if you go back far enough. The Blacks, in particular, had several members who found the Adams approach to magic intriguingly unconstrained by conventional morality. Exchanges of knowledge, artifacts, and occasionally bodily fluids occurred with predictable results." "Please stop talking about bodily fluids," Ron groaned. "Whistle chirp pop, squeamishness about biological realities is such a British trait. The Adams family celebrates all aspects of existence, the messy, the macabre, and the mundane alike." As they climbed the stairs toward Gryffindor Tower, Harry found himself wondering just how many wizarding families might have connections to the Adamses that they'd conveniently forgotten or hidden. The idea that even the Malfoys might have skeletons in their family closet, perhaps literally, given what he was learning about the Adams family, was strangely satisfying. The next few days saw ITT's popularity at Hogwarts reach unprecedented heights. The impromptu Hogwarts Herald had indeed published its first issue, featuring a full front-page spread about ITT's visit, complete with Colin's photographs. To everyone's astonishment, ITT's image in the magical photos occasionally disappeared entirely, leaving only the bowler hat hovering in midair, then reappeared elsewhere in the frame, photobombing other subjects. Chirp whistle pop, a common Adams trait in magical photography. Something about our particular magical signature disrupts the standard animation enchantments. Great Uncle Fester once had his entire photographic collection animate into a unified narrative, quite disturbing when displayed chronologically. The progression from baby photos to criminal evidence created awkward conversations at family gatherings. ITT had become something of a guest lecturer, invited to multiple classes to provide unique perspectives. In Charms, Professor Flitwick had ITT demonstrate unusual sound manipulation spells that the Adams family had developed for their distinctive musical instruments. In Transfiguration, McGonagall, having apparently decided that education trumped bureaucratic concerns, invited ITT to discuss taxonomically ambiguous transformations, a lecture that left seventh years frantically taking notes while looking both fascinated and disturbed. Even Professor Trelawney had requested ITT's presence in Divination, where ITT had apparently performed a hair-raising prediction involving the planetary alignment and its effects on magical hair growth that had the normally skeptical Hermione grudgingly impressed. The astronomical calculations were actually quite precise, she admitted. Though I still don't believe that Jupiter's position determines whether Snape washes his hair. Whistle chirp pop. Celestial influences on personal grooming habits are well documented in certain obscure texts. The Addams Family Grimoire contains an entire chapter on cosmic trichology, the study of hair as influenced by stellar phenomena. The only professor who hadn't embraced ITT's presence was, predictably, Snape. Yet even his resistance crumbled when ITT casually mentioned during dinner an obscure potion technique involving hair-based stabilization for volatile transformation brews. Whistle chirp pop, the key is using taxonomically ambiguous donor material, creates a buffer zone between conflicting magical properties. The Addams family has supplied specialty ingredients to potions researchers for generations. My own contributions have proven particularly effective for brews involving perceptual manipulation. Snape had maintained his disdainful expression, but Harry noticed him leaning slightly closer to catch every word. By the third day post-Yule ball, a remarkable social shift had occurred at Hogwarts. Students from all houses could be seen sporting hairstyles clearly inspired by ITT, everything from dramatically long locks to elaborate updos adorned with tiny bowler hats transfigured from buttons. "You've started a fashion revolution," Harry commented as they walked to breakfast, passing a group of Hufflepuff girls who had somehow charmed their hair to move independently. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams family has influenced fashion in every century since powdered wigs and Iron Maidens were all the rage. Hair as a form of self-expression transcends conventional boundaries, much like the Addamses themselves. Even the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students had been caught up in the ITT phenomenon. Victor Crumb had taken to having intense conversations with ITT about Eastern European magical traditions, while Fleur Delacour had apparently consulted ITT about incorporating more dramatic elegance into her tournament approach. Chirp whistle pop, the French have always appreciated the theatrical aspects of the Addams aesthetic. Fleur has excellent instincts, her Vila heritage gives her natural flair that merely needs proper channeling. On the fourth day after the ball, as they sat at breakfast, the Daily Prophet arrived with yet another Rita Skeeter article, Addams Aberration, Potter's cousin raises questions about boy who lived's heritage in a shocking development that may rewrite wizarding history as we know it. Extensive research by this reporter has confirmed genuine genealogical connections between Harry Potter and the infamous Addams family of America, a clan known for magical practices so bizarre they exist outside conventional classification. The Potter family has been hiding its connection to the Addamses for generations, reveals Caractacus Burke, 103, of Artifact fame. James Potter's grandfather had a sister who married into the Addams clan in the 1920s after a scandalous affair involving experimental charms and unauthorized magical hybridization. This blood connection raises disturbing questions about Potter's own magical nature. Could the boy who lived survival of the killing curse be attributed not to some unique power of love, as Albus Dumbledore has claimed, but to inherited Addams traits of taxonomic ambiguity? Ministry experts have long noted that the Addams family demonstrates unusual resistance to conventional magic, including certain curses that would be fatal to normal wizards. Classification-resistant beings often show immunity to spells calibrated for standard human magical cores, explains Dolores Umbridge, senior undersecretary to the Minister for Magic. If Potter has Addams blood, his status as a regular wizard comes into question. This reporter has further discovered that Lily Evans Potter made multiple visits to the Addams family mansion in New York during her pregnancy, raising the possibility that prenatal exposure to the family's unique magical environment may have altered her unborn child's magical development. The ministry has opened a formal inquiry into Potter's precise magical classification, with results pending full investigation. Harry lowered the newspaper, feeling a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, Rita's article was clearly trying to cause trouble for him, suggesting he wasn't a normal wizard could potentially have serious consequences. On the other hand, there was something oddly validating about having his connection to the Addams family confirmed as real, not just something ITT had made up. "This is getting out of hand," Hermione said worriedly. "First they questioned ITT's classification, and now they're using that to question yours, Harry." Chirp whistle pop, a predictable bureaucratic response. The ministry has always found the Addams family's resistance to neat categorization deeply troubling. Classification is control. If they can't classify you, they can't fully regulate you. "But I'm just a normal wizard," Harry protested. I don't have any weird, taxonomic ambiguity or whatever. Whistle chirp pop, don't you? You survived a curse specifically designed to be unsurvivable. You consistently defy magical expectations. You've shown unusual aptitude for defensive magic beyond your years. The Addams family traits often express themselves subtly across generations before manifesting more dramatically. Harry stared at ITT. Are you saying I might start growing hair all over and speaking in chirps? Chirp whistle pop, highly unlikely. Though your children might develop interesting characteristics. Addams traits tend to appear in surprising ways after skipping a generation or two. Your father showed minimal external Addams traits but had our family's traditional disregard for arbitrary rules and attraction to unusual magical scenarios. Ron was reading the article with growing indignation. This is rubbish. They can't just decide Harry's not a regular wizard because of some distant relative. Whistle chirp pop, they can certainly try. Magical bureaucracy thrives on creating and enforcing arbitrary distinctions. The question is how to respond. The Addams approach would be to embrace the ambiguity, make them so uncomfortable with their inability to classify you that they eventually give up trying. Or, Hermione suggested, we could find documentation proving Harry's standard magical classification. Birth records, Hogwarts registration, there must be official paperwork. Whistle chirp pop, a more conventional approach, but potentially effective. Though I must say, Cousin Harry, there are advantages to taxonomic ambiguity. The Addams family has enjoyed legal exemptions from 17 different magical regulations due to our unclassifiable status. As they debated responses to Rita's article, Professor McGonagall approached their table, looking grave. Potter, she said quietly, the headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately. You as well, Mr. ITT. It seems the ministry is taking this classification question quite seriously. They followed McGonagall through the castle, Harry's stomach churning with worry. What if the ministry actually tried to claim he wasn't a proper wizard? Could they prevent him from finishing at Hogwarts? Take his wand. When they entered Dumbledore's office, they found not only the headmaster waiting but also a small delegation from the ministry, including Umbridge again, looking triumphant, and to Harry's surprise, Mr. Weasley. Arthur? Harry said in confusion. Mr. Weasley gave him a reassuring smile. Hello, Harry. I'm here representing the Department of Magical Law Enforcement's Records Division. Apparently, there are some questions about your classification. This is absurd, McGonagall said sharply. Potter is obviously a wizard, he's been attending Hogwarts for 3.5 years. Yet he has now been confirmed to have Addams blood, Umbridge countered sweetly. And given his unusual history of surviving unsurvivable curses, it raises legitimate regulatory questions. Chirp whistle pop, fascinating. The ministry's obsession with classification has now extended to retroactively questioning the status of established wizards. I do believe this sets a new record for bureaucratic overreach, even by British standards. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled as he gestured for everyone to sit. While I appreciate the ministry's diligence in regulatory matters, I must question the timing and motivation of this inquiry. Harry has been registered as a wizard since birth, attended by metawitches with standard magical classification training, and enrolled at Hogwarts through our ordinary admissions process, which includes magical identification charms. Procedures can fail when confronted with sufficiently unusual cases, Umbridge insisted. The Abraens Connection was unknown until now. Chirp whistle pop, unknown to you, perhaps. The connection has always existed in genealogical records for those who trouble to look. The Addams family maintains extensive documentation of all bloodline branches, including the Potter connection. Mr. Weasley cleared his throat. I've brought Harry's official magical registration from the Ministry archives, he said, producing a scroll tied with purple ribbon. It's standard in every way, detection of magical ability at birth, monitoring of early accidental magic incidents, wand registration. There's nothing in his file to suggest non-standard classification. That was before we knew about his Adams heritage, Umbridge countered. Chirp whistle pop, a genealogical connection doesn't automatically confer taxonomic ambiguity, Madam Umbridge. The Adams family has married into dozens of standard wizarding families over the centuries. Some descendants show our family's unique traits, others express entirely conventional magical characteristics. Are you claiming that Potter is just a normal wizard, then? Umbridge asked ITT with obvious skepticism. Whistle chirp pop, I'm claiming that your binary classification system is fundamentally inadequate for the rich spectrum of magical existence. Harry is Harry, a wizard with a unique magical signature like every other wizard, whose particular talents and resistances reflect both his individual nature and his diverse magical heritage. Dumbledore nodded approvingly. Well put, Mr. ITT. The Ministry's tendency to sort magical beings into rigid categories has always struck me as an administrative convenience rather than an accurate reflection of magical reality. Umbridge's face darkened. The classification system exists for the safety and security of the wizarding world. Unclassified magical entities present potential dangers that must be monitored and regulated. Chirp whistle pop, and yet the most dangerous wizards in history have all been perfectly classifiable under your system. Curious how taxonomic clarity doesn't prevent dark magic but may actually enable it through false security. The Addams family has always found that embracing ambiguity leads to more ethical magical practice. When you can't rely on arbitrary categories to determine right and wrong, you must develop more nuanced moral reasoning. Harry was impressed by ITT's eloquent defense, which seemed to leave even Umbridge momentarily speechless. Mr. Weasley took advantage of the silence. According to all official documentation and magical testing, Harry Potter is classified as a wizard, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Unless the Ministry intends to create an entirely new classification system and retroactively apply it to the entire wizarding population, which would require approval from the Wisengamot and international magical cooperation bodies, there's no basis for reclassifying Harry specifically. Umbridge looked like she'd bitten into something sour. This matter requires further investigation. The minister will need to be consulted. By all means, Dumbledore said pleasantly. In the meantime, Harry will continue his education as normal, including participation in the Triwizard Tournament, which, I remind everyone, constitutes a binding magical contract. As the meeting concluded and the Ministry officials prepared to leave, ITT approached Umbridge directly. Chirp whistle pop, a word of friendly advice, Madam Undersecretary. The Addams family has centuries of experience with bureaucratic interference. Those who pursue classification crusades against us typically find their careers taking unexpected turns, not through any action on our part, but through the mysterious workings of bureaucratic karma. The filing cabinets remember, you see, and paperwork has a way of developing sentience when sufficiently activated by regulatory obsession. Umbridge's face paled slightly before she huffed and turned away, following the others out of the office. When only Dumbledore, McGonagall, Harry, and ITT remained, the headmaster smiled broadly. Most illuminating. I've long found Ministry classification efforts to be among their less productive endeavors. Will this cause problems for Harry? McGonagall asked with concern. Chirp whistle pop, unlikely in the long term. The Addams family has extensive experience with deflecting bureaucratic attention. I've already sent an owl to our family solicitor in London, a delightful ghoul of a man who specializes in classification disputes. He once successfully argued that my third cousin twice removed should be classified as a seasonal decorative arrangement rather than a sentient plant to avoid garden taxation. Harry couldn't help laughing despite his concerns. So I'm not going to start growing hair all over or developing weird Addams traits. Chirp whistle pop, the Potter-Addams genetic connection is relatively distant, Cousin Harry. You might have inherited our family's attraction to unusual magical situations and our resilience against conventional harm, but physical manifestations are highly unlikely. Though I'd watch your children carefully, Addams traits have been known to skip generations before appearing in spectacular fashion. As they left Dumbledore's office, Harry felt oddly reassured. The idea that his survival against Voldemort might be partially explained by some inherited Adam's resilience was actually comforting, not because it diminished his parents' sacrifice, but because it connected that sacrifice to a deeper family history he was only beginning to discover. "So what now?" he asked ITT as they descended the spiral staircase. "The Ministry seems determined to make an issue of our connection." Chirp whistle pop. Now we embrace the classic Adams strategy for bureaucratic entanglements, be so consistently, cheerfully bizarre that they eventually decide the paperwork isn't worth the psychological trauma. Harry grinned. "I think I can manage that." Whistle chirp pop. "Of course you can. It's in your blood." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. ITT's presence at Hogwarts had transformed from a brief Yule Ball visit into something approaching a cultural phenomenon. Students developed a scheduled rotation for consulting ITT on everything from fashion advice to family curses to relationship problems. Chirp whistle pop. Young love benefits tremendously from an Adams perspective. Traditional courtship often lacks the essential elements of creative risk, grand theatrical gestures, and the delicious possibility of mutual destruction. Harry wasn't sure the couples following ITT's relationship advice would survive intact, but they certainly seemed more dramatically engaged with each other. Meanwhile, preparations for the second task had begun in earnest. Hermione had commandeered a corner of the library dedicated to underwater breathing methods, with stacks of books ranging from Practical Water Breathing, A Swimmer's Guide to Not Drowning, to Amphibious Transfiguration Through the Ages. "I still think gillyweed is our best option," Harry said after a particularly frustrating practice session with the bubblehead charm that had left him gasping on the bathroom floor when the bubble collapsed prematurely. Chirp whistle pop. A sound choice. Gillyweed provides comprehensive adaptation, gills, webbed extremities, enhanced underwater vision. The Adams family has used it recreationally for generations. Cousin What holds the family record for underwater croquet, 17 hours without surfacing. "But where do we get it?" Ron asked for the 10th time. "Snape's not exactly going to hand over rare potion ingredients to Harry out of the goodness of his heart." Whistle chirp pop. "Leave that to me." The proper approach to Severus Snape requires understanding his particular psychology, a blend of intellectual pride, unresolved trauma, and unexpressed creative frustration. "You're going to psychoanalyze Snape?" Harry asked incredulously. Chirp whistle pop. The Adams family has extensive experience with complex, tormented personalities. Great-Aunt Morticia studied under Jung himself, though he later required extensive therapy after their sessions. Her paper, Sublimation Through Controlled Poisoning, A Path to Individuation, remains controversial in psychological circles. True to ITT's word, the following afternoon found them outside Snape's office, ITT having insisted this was the optimal time, whistle chirp pop, late enough that his morning classes have irritated him, but not so late that he's nursing his evening resentments. The mid-afternoon Snape exists in a narrow window of potential approachability. Harry seriously doubted Snape had any window of approachability, but he'd learned not to underestimate ITT's peculiar insights. ITT knocked on Snape's door with a hair-covered appendage, and a terse "enter" came from within. Snape looked up from his desk, his face immediately hardening when he saw Harry. "Potter. To what do I owe this unwelcome intrusion?" Before Harry could speak, ITT glided forward. Chirp whistle pop, Professor Snape. "I've been hoping for an opportunity to discuss your fascinating paper on stabilization techniques for volatile transformative potions. The Adams family has a long-standing interest in the field, particularly the use of taxonomically ambiguous ingredients as anchors for metamorphic brews." Snape's expression shifted subtly, surprise briefly overtaking disdain. "You've read my paper in Potions Quarterly?" Chirp whistle pop, "Read it. I've annotated it. Your innovation in using moonstone powder as a temporal regulator for the transformation phase was brilliant, reminiscent of Arsenius Jigger's early work but with significantly improved stability metrics." A look Harry had never seen before crossed Snape's face, something almost like pleased surprise. That connection to Jigger's work is rarely recognized. Whistle chirp pop, Academic myopia is a tragedy of the modern potions community. The Addams Family Library contains first editions of Jigger's unpublished experimental journals. His early attempts at metamorphic stabilization using unconventional biological materials were ahead of his time. For the next 15 minutes, Harry stood in silent amazement as ITT and Snape engaged in what appeared to be a genuinely enthusiastic discussion of obscure potions theory. ITT described Addams' family techniques involving hair-based stabilization methods that had Snape actually taking notes, his usual sneer replaced by intense concentration. Chirp whistle pop, which brings me to the purpose of our visit. In the spirit of academic exchange, I'd like to offer you this. ITT produced what appeared to be a small vial filled with shimmering amber strands from within the mass of hair. A sample of Addams' hair, specifically prepared for potions use. 7 generations of exposure to unique magical environments have imbued it with properties you'll find fascinating. Snape stared at the vial with poorly concealed interest. And what would you expect in exchange for this unusual ingredient? Whistle chirp pop, merely a small supply of Mediterranean gillyweed. Cousin Harry's upcoming task has created an educational opportunity to demonstrate proper underwater breathing techniques. The Addams family believes practical experience is the best teacher, especially when failure could result in spectacular drowning. Snape's eyes flicked to Harry, calculation evident in his expression. Potter's tournament preparations are not my concern. Whistle chirp pop, of course not. This is strictly an academic exchange between potions enthusiasts. The applications are secondary to the principle of knowledge sharing between those who properly appreciate rare ingredients. Harry held his breath as Snape appeared to consider the offer. Finally, the potions master rose and went to his private stores, returning with a small jar containing what looked like slimy green rat tails. This should be sufficient for a single hour-long transformation, Snape said, handing the jar to ITT rather than Harry. I would be interested in hearing the results of any experimentation with the sample you've provided. Chirp whistle pop, naturally. The Addams family maintains meticulous records of all ingredient exchanges. I shall ensure you receive detailed notes on any discoveries made using our contribution. As they left Snape's office, Harry stared at ITT in disbelief. How did you do that? Snape hates me. Whistle chirp pop, his feelings toward you are irrelevant when presented with something he values more than his resentments. The Addams approach to negotiation always involves identifying what the other party truly desires, then offering a taste of it with the promise of more. But will your hair actually help his potions? Harry asked curiously. Chirp whistle pop, absolutely. Though perhaps not in the way he anticipates. Addams' hair has unique properties when used in potions, including a tendency to make the brews develop personalities. His experimental batches will likely begin commenting on his technique and offering unsolicited advice. Educational, if somewhat unnerving. Harry winced, imagining Snape's reaction to talking potions. That seems potentially dangerous for future negotiations. Whistle chirp pop, on the contrary. The initial shock will give way to intellectual fascination. The Addams family specializes in gifts that keep on giving, usually in ways that fundamentally alter the recipient's perspective. By next year, Severus Snape will have developed an entirely new branch of sentient potion theory, and he'll have forgotten it began with his irritation toward you. Harry shook his head in amazement. You Addamses think long-term, don't you? Chirp whistle pop, when your family regularly communicates with ancestors from the 16th century at dinner parties, your perspective naturally extends in both directions. Speaking of which, we should begin testing this gillyweed soon. Proper preparation prevents particularly pathetic performances. They gathered Ron and Hermione and made their way to the prefect's bathroom again, this time with explicit permission from Dumbledore to use the facilities for tournament preparation. Harry eyed the gillyweed dubiously as ITT explained the properties. Chirp whistle pop, you'll need to consume it just before entering the water. The transformation begins within seconds and lasts approximately 1 hour, depending on freshness and dosage. The initial sensation is distinctive. Distinctive how? Harry asked suspiciously. Whistle chirp pop, like your respiratory system is simultaneously imploding and exploding while your extremities melt and reform. The Addams children describe it as ticklish. Ticklish? Ron exclaimed. That sounds horrible. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams definition of ticklish may differ somewhat from standard usage. Great Uncle Fester considers mild electrocution refreshingly ticklish. After dividing the gillyweed into a test dose and a larger portion for the actual task, Harry reluctantly agreed to try it. Standing at the edge of the filled tub in his swimwear, he looked at the slimy greenish lump with apprehension. Just chew and swallow, he confirmed. Whistle chirp pop, precisely. Though I recommend not focusing on the texture or flavor, both are acquired tastes. Harry took a deep breath, shoved the gillyweed into his mouth, and chewed quickly. The taste and consistency were even worse than the appearance suggested, like fishy, salty rubber bands coated in slime. He forced himself to swallow, then waited nervously. The effect was immediate and exactly as ITT had described, simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. Harry felt a searing pain on either side of his neck, and his hands and feet began to tingle agonizingly. He stumbled forward into the water as he gasped for air that suddenly seemed insufficient. Underwater, the transformation completed. Gills had formed on his neck, his hands had become webbed, and his feet had elongated into flipper-like appendages. Most remarkably, he could breathe easily through his newly formed gills, extracting oxygen from the water as naturally as his lungs had from air. He surfaced to see Ron, Hermione, and ITT watching anxiously. It works, he exclaimed, though it came out as a gurgling croak since his vocal cords had also transformed. Chirp whistle pop, excellent. How's your vision underwater? The adaptation should include enhanced visual clarity in aquatic environments. Harry ducked beneath the surface again and was pleasantly surprised to find he could indeed see clearly without his glasses, which he'd removed before the test. The underwater world appeared in sharp focus, with colors more vivid than he'd expected. He spent 20 minutes testing his new abilities, swimming with remarkable speed and agility, diving to the bottom of the deep tub, even experimenting with how long he could stay above water, not long before his gills started to feel painfully dry. This is brilliant, he told them when the effects finally began to wear off. I think this solves the breathing problem completely. Chirp whistle pop, a solid foundation. Now we need to address tactical approaches to merfolk encounters, Grindylow defense strategies, and temperature management in February lake conditions. The next week passed in a flurry of preparation. ITT proved to be a remarkably knowledgeable coach for the underwater task. Chirp whistle pop, merfolk respond well to direct eye contact and confident body language. They respect courage but punish perceived arrogance. A slight bow shows appropriate deference without submission, critical distinction in their culture. Chirp whistle pop, Grindylows hunt in packs but have poor coordination. Their grip is their primary weapon, the fingers contain a mild paralytic secretion. Breaking their grip within the first 3 seconds is essential before the toxin takes effect. Chirp whistle pop, cold water depletes magical energy faster than normal conditions. The Addams family has developed a specialized warming charm that creates a thin thermal layer between skin and water without interfering with gills. The incantation is, Calidus membrana, focus on heat emanating outward from your core rather than inward from your skin. Harry practiced diligently, growing more confident in his underwater abilities each day. The specialized warming charm ITT taught him was particularly useful. Without it, even the bathtub water quickly became uncomfortably cold during his longer practice sessions. Throughout this intensive training, ITT continued to be a Hogwarts sensation. The ITT effect, as students had begun calling it, had spread beyond fashion to influence everything from musical preferences. The Weird Sisters had reportedly begun working on an album incorporating elements inspired by ITT's Screaming Sorrow Pipe, to study habits. Ravenclaws had started forming, taxonomically diverse, study groups that deliberately mixed students with different learning approaches. Even more remarkably, ITT had somehow broken down certain house barriers. One evening, Harry entered the library to find students from all four houses gathered around ITT, who was demonstrating what appeared to be an unusual form of divination involving hair wrapped around wands. Chirp whistle pop, the pattern of wrapping reveals affinity paths between magical cores and their optimal expression. See how Miss Lovegood shows a spiral formation. Classic indicator of nonlinear magical processing, highly advantageous for perceptual expansion work. Luna beamed as students who had previously dismissed her as odd now looked at her with new respect. And Longbottoms? Asked a Slytherin's sixth year with surprising lack of disdain. Whistle chirp pop, ah. A beautiful root-like pattern, signifying deep connection to fundamental earth magic. Mr. Longbottom's affinity for herbology isn't just interest or talent, it's a core magical resonance. With proper development, plant-based defensive magic could become his signature strength. Neville looked stunned by this assessment. Plant-based defensive magic? Is that even a thing? Chirp whistle pop, the Addams Family Botanical Garden contains 17 species of combat-ready flora. Great Aunt Morticia's venomous tentacula won the 1962 Magical Home Defense competition by incapacitating 3 attacking wizards while simultaneously serving tea to the judges. As the second task drew nearer, Harry found himself feeling strangely reluctant about ITT's impending departure. What had begun as a desperate solution to his Yule Ball problem had somehow evolved into one of the most educational and oddly comforting connections he'd made at Hogwarts. When exactly do you have to leave? Harry asked one evening as they sat by the Gryffindor common room fire. Chirp whistle pop, my return port key is scheduled for February 25th, the day after your second task. I wouldn't dream of missing your triumphant aquatic adventure. The Addams family places great importance on witnessing relatives' potentially life-threatening challenges. Harry smiled. I'm really glad you came, you know. Not just for the ball or the task help, but for everything. Whistle chirp pop, family is everything, Cousin Harry. The Addamses may express it differently than most, but that core value never changes. Your parents understood that, it's why they maintained their connection to our branch of the family despite the unconventional nature of the relationship. What were they like when they visited your family? Harry asked, hungry as always for information about his parents. Chirp whistle pop, your father was a natural Addams despite his diluted bloodline, embraced every bizarre experience with enthusiasm and humor. During their honeymoon visit, he participated in the family's traditional midnight hunt through the swamp without hesitation, even after being informed that the quarry was technically hunting us as well. And my mom? Whistle chirp pop, ah, Lily. She and Grandmama formed an immediate bond over their shared interest in unusual potions. Your mother had a surprisingly Addams-like appreciation for the elegant dance between beneficial and harmful properties in botanical ingredients. Her theoretical work on protective blood magic particularly impressed the family, practical, powerful, and just gothic enough to earn Addams' approval. Harry felt a lump in his throat. Blood magic? Like, what protected me? Chirp whistle pop, indeed. The magic your mother used to protect you drew on ancient principles that most modern wizards have forgotten or dismissed as dark. The Addams family has always recognized that magic itself isn't dark or light, it's primal, elemental, responding to intent and sacrifice. Lily understood that instinctively. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the fire. Then Harry asked a question that had been bothering him. ITT, what exactly are you? I mean, species-wise. ITT's hair rippled in what Harry had come to recognize as amusement. Chirp whistle pop, a question bureaucrats have been asking for generations. The simple answer is that I'm an Addams. Taxonomy becomes irrelevant after a certain point of magical evolution. The family has intermarried with so many unusual beings and exposed ourselves to so many exotic magical environments that we've transcended conventional classification. But you must have been something originally, Harry pressed. Whistle chirp pop, origin stories are rarely as illuminating as one hopes, Cousin Harry. The Addams family contains multitudes, some branches more human than others, some more adjacent to humanity. I represent a specialized evolutionary path optimized for certain magical frequencies. The hair is merely the visible manifestation of a more complex adaptive process. Harry nodded, sensing he wouldn't get a more specific answer. Perhaps ITT was right, precise classification wasn't always important. After all, Harry himself was technically just wizard, but that simple label hardly captured the complex reality of his life and experiences. Whatever you are, Harry said finally, I'm glad we're related. Chirp whistle pop, as am I, cousin Harry. As am I. The night before the second task, Harry found himself unable to sleep. Despite all the preparation with ITT, the thought of diving into the Black Lake in February to rescue an unknown hostage from mere people was enough to keep anyone awake. He slipped out of bed and made his way down to the common room, surprised to find ITT already there, seemingly in conversation with the fire itself. Chirp whistle pop, ah, cousin Harry. Trouble sleeping? Perfectly understandable, premortal peril insomnia is an Addams family tradition. I was just consulting with your house's fire elemental about tomorrow's weather conditions. Our fire elemental? Harry asked, looking dubiously at the fireplace. Whistle chirp pop, all old magical buildings develop semi-sentient elemental presences over time. Hogwarts is particularly rich with them, the fires know things the stones don't, the stones know things the water doesn't, and so on. They're not fully conscious in the human sense but have accumulated impressions and patterns. Harry sat beside ITT. And what does our fire elemental predict for tomorrow? Chirp whistle pop, cold but clear, good visibility underwater, though the temperature will be challenging even with the warming charm. The lake elemental is apparently feeling particularly territorial tomorrow, something about disruption to the merfolk village making the water spirits restless. Great, Harry muttered. Anything else I should worry about? Whistle chirp pop, worry is wasted energy, cousin Harry. The Addams approach to danger is simple, expect the worst, prepare accordingly, then embrace whatever actually happens with enthusiasm. Whether triumph or disaster, it's all experience. Harry couldn't help smiling. There was something oddly comforting about ITT's perpetually macabre optimism. Chirp whistle pop, I have something for you, ITT said suddenly, producing a small object from within the depths of hair. A traditional Addams gift for family members facing potential doom. ITT handed Harry what appeared to be a tiny silver box, no bigger than a matchbox, engraved with strange symbols. What is it? Harry asked, turning it carefully in his hands. Whistle chirp pop, an emergency extraction box. When opened underwater while thinking intently of air, it creates a temporary bubble of breathable atmosphere, just enough for a minute or two of oxygen. The Addams family developed them for our traditional underwater escape room challenges. Underwater escape rooms? Harry repeated incredulously. Chirp whistle pop, character-building family activities. Nothing motivates problem-solving quite like imminent drowning. Harry tucked the tiny box into the pocket of his pajamas. Thank you. I hope I won't need it, but... Whistle chirp pop, the best emergency measures are those never used but always available. The Addams family motto regarding safety devices is, prepare for catastrophe, hope for mere disaster. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. Eventually, Harry asked the question that had been lingering in his mind since ITT's arrival. After you go back to America, will we stay in touch? Chirp whistle pop, of course. The Addams-Potter connection has been re-established and shall remain so. We'll correspond regularly, the family will expect detailed updates on your life-threatening adventures and romantic entanglements. Both are considered essential Addams developmental experiences. And could I, maybe visit sometime? Harry asked hesitantly. Whistle chirp pop, we would be delighted. The Addams mansion has a room prepared for Potter relatives at all times, complete with the traditional welcoming features, self-rearranging furniture, temperature-sensitive wallpaper that displays your deepest fears when you have fever dreams, and a bed that gently rocks you to sleep while whispering ancient lullabies in forgotten languages. That sounds uniquely comfortable, Harry said diplomatically. Chirp whistle pop, we pride ourselves on distinctive hospitality. The family would be thrilled to host you during a school holiday. Summer at the mansion is particularly exciting, the swamp creatures are most active, and the annual Addams family reunion brings relatives from across the dimensional spectrum. The thought of spending time with an entire mansion full of beings like ITT was both terrifying and strangely appealing. At the very least, it would be a significant improvement over the Dursleys. I'd like that, Harry said sincerely. Maybe this summer, if Dumbledore allows it. Chirp whistle pop, excellent. I shall inform the family to prepare the guest wing and reduce the lethality settings on the recreational traps to beginner level. Harry decided not to ask for clarification on that last point. Now, ITT continued, you should attempt to sleep. Tomorrow's aquatic adventure requires peak physical and magical condition. The Addams family recommends at least 6 hours of unconsciousness before any potentially fatal challenge. Taking ITT's peculiar but well-intentioned advice, Harry returned to his dormitory, feeling oddly reassured. Whatever tomorrow's task brought, he had family supporting him, unusual, hair-covered, taxonomically ambiguous family, but family nonetheless. As he drifted off to sleep, he found himself wondering what life might have been like if he'd known about his Addams connections earlier. Perhaps growing up with an understanding that being different wasn't just acceptable but celebrated would have made his childhood with the Dursleys more bearable. But then, as ITT would probably say, the past was merely prologue to the present's delightfully uncertain future. And Harry's future now included a branch of family he'd never expected, one that embraced the strange, the unexpected, and the potentially catastrophic with equal enthusiasm. Tomorrow, he would dive into the Black Lake to face Mere People, Grindylows, and whatever else lurked in its depths. But he would do so with gillyweed in his stomach, a warming charm on his skin, an extraction box in his pocket, and the knowledge that somewhere on the shore, a mass of sentient hair in a bowler hat would be cheering him on with macabre enthusiasm. Family, Harry was discovering, came in many forms. And sometimes, the strangest forms were the most accepting of all. Chapter 3, the heir apparent. Harry burst through the surface of the Black Lake, gasping for air as his gills receded and his lungs painfully reasserted themselves. The February wind hit him like a slap, his wet skin instantly prickling with goosebumps despite ITT's warming charm. He clutched Ron tightly with one arm while treading water, looking around wildly for the shore. The crowd roared, thousands of voices merging into a wall of sound. Harry spotted the judge's platform and began swimming toward it, his half-transformed limbs still providing decent propulsion. Ron sputtered beside him, having just woken from the Merpeople's enchanted sleep. Bloody hell, Ron gasped. Did you just, was I really, bottom of the lake? Yep, Harry panted, pushing forward through the icy water. Merpeople Village. You were tied up. Hostages. Mental, Ron muttered, shivering violently. Completely mental. As they approached the platform, Harry spotted a distinctive mass of hair bouncing excitedly at the water's edge. ITT had somehow acquired a gigantic banner that read, Cousin Harry, guaranteed either triumph or spectacular drowning, in flashing letters that alternated between gold and blood red. There's your weird cousin, Ron said, somehow managing to sound both grateful and disturbed. Looks like ITT started a fan club. Harry squinted through water-blurred vision at the figures surrounding ITT. At least 20 students wore what appeared to be tiny bowler hats perched on their heads, and several had charmed their hair into ITT-like styles that moved independently in the wind. The moment Harry's feet touched the lake bottom, ITT rushed forward into the knee-deep water, completely disregarding the wet conditions. Chirp whistle pop. Magnificent performance. ITT's translation orb boomed, hovering above the water's surface. Classic Addams approach, not just completing the challenge but adding dramatic flair by rescuing an extra hostage. The family will be thrilled when they hear about your unnecessary risk-taking. I couldn't just leave her there, Harry mumbled as Madame Pomfrey descended upon him, wrapping him in a thick, warm blanket and forcing a pepper-up potion down his throat. Whistle chirp pop, of course not. The moral complexity makes the tale so much more entertaining for future family gatherings. The time Cousin Harry faced ethical dilemmas while oxygen deprived, will become a cherished narrative in our ancestral collection. As steam poured from Harry's ears from the pepper-up potion, he noticed Fleur Delacour rushing toward him, still wrapped in blankets herself. "You saved her," she cried, throwing her arms around Harry. "Even though she was not your hostage." Whistle chirp pop, another benefit of heroic excess, attractive people embracing you while wet. The Addams family has used near-death experiences as courtship techniques for generations. Harry felt his face burn as Fleur kissed him on both cheeks before turning to Ron and doing the same. "And you too, you elked." "Yeah," Ron said, looking dazed for reasons that had nothing to do with the merpeople's enchantment. "A bit." Dumbledore was crouched at the water's edge in deep conversation with a particularly fierce-looking merperson, the chief who had directed Harry in the underwater village. After a minute, he straightened up, turning to confer with the other judges. "Chirp whistle pop, negotiating your score, no doubt. The merpeople are impressed, according to my limited understanding of their surface language. Something about moral fiber and disregard for self-preservation, both highly regarded qualities in their culture." Sure enough, when Ludo Bagman's magically amplified voice announced the scores, Harry's moral fiber earned him second place despite finishing outside the 1-hour time limit. "That puts you tied for first with Diggory," Ron exclaimed as they made their way back to the castle, still wrapped in blankets. "You and Cedric are leading the tournament." Whistle chirp pop, a triumph worthy of recognition. "We must celebrate in traditional Addams fashion." "Please tell me that doesn't involve near drowning," Harry said quickly. Chirp whistle pop, certainly not. We never repeat life-threatening scenarios on the same day. The Addams celebration tradition involves feast, storytelling, and the ceremonial reenactment of the victory with increasingly exaggerated details. By the third retelling, there should be at least one giant sea monster and a dramatic last-breath rescue. As they entered the Great Hall, where a special lunch had been prepared for after the task, Harry was stunned to discover that ITT's fan club was significantly larger than the small group he'd noticed at the lake. At least 50 students from all houses wore tiny bowler hat pins, and a dedicated table had been set up with a banner declaring, "The official Hogwarts ITT Appreciation Society." "When did this happen?" Harry asked, bewildered. Chirp whistle pop, organically, over the past week. Young Colin Creevey approached me about forming a proper society after the success of his newspaper feature. Apparently my unique perspective on taxonomic ambiguity and magical expression has resonated with students feeling constrained by conventional classifications. "You've started a philosophical movement," Hermione said, looking impressed despite herself as she joined them. Whistle chirp pop, the Addams family has a long tradition of accidental cultural influence. Great-Uncle Fester once inspired an entire Parisian fashion season after being mistaken for an avant-garde designer during an unfortunate crypt incident. As they sat down to eat, Harry became aware of yet another unusual development. Students from different houses were freely mixing, sitting at whichever table they pleased rather than maintaining the traditional house separation. "This is new," he commented to Hermione. She nodded. "It started with ITT's inter-house study groups. Professor Flitwick was so impressed with the improved spell results that he suggested making mixed house seating optional during regular meals. Dumbledore approved it yesterday." Chirp whistle pop, artificial boundaries between fundamentally similar groups has always struck the Addams family as inefficient. "We categorize relatives by their specific peculiarities rather than arbitrary groupings, much more useful for holiday seating arrangements and inheritance disputes." Harry was about to respond when a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Rita Skeeter had arrived, her acid green quill already floating beside her as she surveyed the room with predatory eyes. She made a beeline for their table, but surprisingly, Dumbledore intercepted her. "Ms. Skeeter," the headmaster said pleasantly, though Harry could detect steel beneath the twinkling eyes. While the task itself was open to the press, I don't recall extending that invitation to the private celebration afterward. The public has a right to know how their champion is faring, Rita insisted, attempting to peer around Dumbledore toward Harry and ITT. Chirp whistle pop, allow me, Headmaster, ITT said, gliding forward. Ms. Skeeter and I have developed a rapport of sorts. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled even more brightly as he stepped aside with a slight bow. By all means, Mr. ITT. ITT approached Rita, who took a small step backward despite her determined expression. Chirp whistle pop, Ms. Skeeter. Your recent articles about the Potter-Abraens connection have been most entertaining. The family has added them to our collection of journalistic curiosities, right between the 1897 piece suggesting Grandmama was secretly 3 gnomes in an evening gown and the 1962 exposé claiming Uncle Fester generates electricity through unnatural means. Rita's quill scribbled frantically. The wizarding public deserves to know the truth about this unusual familial connection and its implications for Potter's magical classification. Whistle chirp pop, truth is such a multifaceted concept, isn't it? Speaking of facets, the Addams Family Legal Department, a delightful collection of beings who technically can't be photographed due to reflection issues, has been researching British magical law regarding unauthorized animagus transformations. Fascinating potential penalties, including something called permanent transfiguration restriction. Rita went very still, her face paling slightly. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Chirp whistle pop, no. My mistake. Though it does remind me that I should return that fascinating beetle I found in Hermione's hair during our library research sessions. I've been keeping it in a charmed jar, the kind that prevents all transformations while inside. I should release it before I leave for America. By now, Rita's face had lost all color. Perhaps I've gathered enough material for today, she said stiffly. I'll just, whistle chirp pop, do come back for my farewell celebration. The Addams family believes in turning enemies into friends, or at minimum, into cautionary tales. As Rita beat a hasty retreat, Hermione turned to ITT with wide eyes. You found out she's an unregistered animagus? That's how she's been getting all her stories. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams family has extensive experience identifying beings who aren't what they appear to be. We host annual family reunions, after all. Ms. Skeeter's distinctive magical signature in both her human and beetle forms is quite recognizable to those with the right perceptual abilities. So that's how she's been listening in on private conversations, Harry said, suddenly understanding. She transforms into a beetle and spies on people. Whistle chirp pop, precisely. A clever approach, if somewhat lacking in imagination. Great Aunt Morticia achieved similar results through trained vampire bats with excellent dictation skills. The celebration continued well into the afternoon, with students coming over in groups to congratulate Harry and chat with ITT. The atmosphere was unusually unified, with house rivalries seemingly forgotten in the collective excitement. Even Cedric Diggory stopped by their table, grinning broadly despite the cuts on his face from his encounter with Grindylows. Well done underwater, Harry. That gillyweed was genius. Thanks, Harry said, genuinely appreciative of Cedric's sportsmanship. Your bubblehead charm worked perfectly too. Whistle chirp pop, young Mr. Diggory has excellent magical form, ITT observed. The Addams family recognizes the elegance of perfect spell execution, essential when the margins between spectacular success and gruesome failure are so delightfully narrow. Cedric looked momentarily uncertain whether to be flattered or concerned, but settled on a polite smile. Thank you, Mr. ITT. Your cousin's underwater warming charm saved me, by the way, he added to Harry. I noticed you using it and managed to copy the wand movement. Without it, I might have had to abandon the task from hypothermia. Chirp whistle pop, knowledge shared is knowledge improved. The Addams family believes that the most useful spells should be widely disseminated, particularly those that prevent premature demise. Extends the opportunity for more interesting deaths later in life. As Cedric departed with a slightly bemused expression, Hermione leaned forward eagerly. That warming charm really could be published, ITT. It's more efficient than any of the standard ones in the textbooks. Whistle chirp pop, Cousin Harry has my permission to share it as he sees fit. The charm originated with Great Aunt Desdemona's passion for winter swamp exploration, though her version included a secondary layer that attracted friendly leeches. I modified it for general use. The rest of the day passed in a happy blur, with Harry feeling more socially comfortable than he could ever remember being at Hogwarts. The constant attention was still there, students watching him, whispering as he passed, but the nature of it had changed. Instead of the suspicious or fearful glances he'd endured since his name came out of the goblet, he was now met with genuine smiles and enthusiastic waves. It's like having ITT here has changed how people see you, Ron commented as they headed back to Gryffindor Tower that evening. Like they finally get that being different isn't automatically bad. Whistle chirp pop, the Adams effect. We tend to recalibrate social norms wherever we go. When confronted with hair-covered beings who speak in unintelligible sounds and celebrate the macabre, suddenly a boy who survived a killing curse seems refreshingly conventional. Harry laughed. I guess everything is relative. Chirp whistle pop, precisely why family is so important. The Addams clan provides essential perspective. After dining with Great Uncle Fester, who regularly illuminates light bulbs by putting them in his mouth, even the most eccentric outsider seems delightfully normal. The next morning brought a development that not even ITT had anticipated. The Daily Prophet arrived, but instead of another Rita Skeeter hit piece, the front page featured a thoroughly researched article by a senior magical genealogist titled Ancient Connections, the Potter-Addams Lineage Explained. The article presented a detailed family tree showing the exact nature of Harry's connection to the Addams clan, along with historical context about both families' contributions to magical development. Far from the sensationalist approach Rita had taken, this piece treated the connection as a fascinating historical discovery rather than a scandal. This is, surprisingly positive, Hermione said, scanning the article. It even mentions that the Potter line's gift for transfiguration may share magical roots with the Addams family's metamorphic abilities. Chirp whistle pop, ah. I see Great Aunt Morticia's hand in this. The family must have deployed our genealogical specialists to provide corrective information. We maintain extensive ancestral records dating back to the founding of the major wizarding families. Harry read the article with growing interest. According to the family tree, his great-great-grandmother Iolanthe Potter, née Peveril, had a sister who married into the Addams family, creating the initial connection. That bloodline had then been strengthened when Harry's grandfather Fleamont's sister, Euphemia, had married an Addams during a sabbatical in America. So we're actually second cousins twice removed, or something? Harry asked ITT, trying to follow the complicated branches. Chirp whistle pop, approximately. Though the Addams approach to family trees is more multidimensional than linear. We consider spiritual kinship and magical resonance as important as direct bloodline. Anyone who survives an Addams family gathering automatically gains honorary cousin status regardless of genetic connection. The article had sparked renewed interest in ITT throughout the school. All day, students approached with genealogical questions about their own families, wondering if they might have Addams connections too. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams family archives contain records of interactions with most old wizarding families. The Macmillans had a fascinating summer exchange program with us in the 1890s, only one casualty, which was considered a great success. The Longbottoms share a common ancestor with our herbology specialized branch, explains young Neville's green thumb. Neville looked simultaneously horrified and proud when ITT revealed this connection. My gran never mentioned that. Whistle chirp pop, many families downplay their Addams connections out of a misguided sense of conventionality. The British wizarding community went through a regrettable period of taxonomic purism in the early 20th century. Many interesting family branches were subsequently pruned from official histories. By lunchtime, the Great Hall had transformed into an impromptu genealogical research center, with ITT at the center, recalling connections between wizarding families that had been forgotten for generations. Even Professor Binns had drifted in, hovering at the edge of the gathering with spectral interest. The historical value of these oral records is immense, Hermione whispered to Harry. ITT is revealing connections that might otherwise be lost forever. Whistle chirp pop, the Addams family believes knowledge should flow freely, particularly knowledge of origins and connections. How can one properly appreciate the glorious peculiarities of the present without understanding the delightfully disturbing roots from which they grew? Not everyone appreciated this genealogical renaissance, however. Draco Malfoy had spent the morning looking increasingly agitated as more and more of his Slytherin compatriots approached ITT with family questions. By lunch, he'd gathered a small group of like-minded students who watched the proceedings with open hostility. "This has gone far enough," Malfoy announced loudly, striding forward as ITT described the Burke family's brief but memorable alliance with the Addamses during the Goblin rebellions. "You're making up these connections to contaminate proper wizarding genealogy with your freakish American nonsense." The hall went quiet, all eyes turning to the confrontation. Whistle chirp pop, young Mr. Malfoy. "Still struggling with that family history, I see. The Addams archives contain 7 letters from your great-grandfather Septimus to cousin Ophelia between 1897 and 1903. Quite passionate correspondence, particularly his request for a lock of her hair to complete a certain ritual that the ministry had inconveniently classified as forbidden." Malfoy's face flushed. "You're lying. The Malfoys would never associate with, chirp whistle pop, with taxonomically ambiguous beings. Yet your family tapestry contains at least 3 members whose portraits mysteriously move only at night. Magical genetics are fascinatingly complex, aren't they? Sometimes traits resurface generations later. Have you noticed any unusual hair growth patterns during full moons, young Draco?" Several students snickered as Malfoy's hand unconsciously moved to his immaculately styled platinum hair. "This creature is corrupting Hogwarts traditions," Malfoy declared, turning to his small group of supporters. "First the house mixing, now this attack on proper genealogy. Who's with me in taking a stand?" About a dozen students, mostly Slytherins but a few from other houses, moved to stand with Malfoy, forming what immediately became known as the Anti-ITT Coalition. Chirp whistle pop, how delightful. Opposition groups add such narrative tension to social dynamics. The Addams family traditionally measures influence by the number and vehemence of those who organize against us. Congratulations, Cousin Harry, my visit has achieved sufficient impact to generate structured resistance. Far from being concerned, ITT seemed genuinely pleased by Malfoy's hostility, which only frustrated the Slytherin further. "We'll be presenting a formal complaint to the Board of Governors," Malfoy threatened. "My father, chirp whistle pop, will be fascinated to learn about our extensive collection of Malfoy family artifacts. Including a certain cursed music box that Abraxas Malfoy sold to Great-Uncle Fester in 1943, documented in our acquisition records with his signature. The very music box that later disappeared from Borgin and Burke's under mysterious circumstances, such an interesting coincidence." Malfoy went pale. "What are you implying?" Whistle chirp pop, merely sharing family history. The Addams record-keeping system is extraordinarily comprehensive. Every transaction, every exchange, every debt, meticulously documented for posterity. We find it prevents unfortunate memory lapses when certain families decide to rewrite their pasts. The standoff ended with Malfoy retreating, muttering threats that sounded increasingly hollow. His anti-ITT coalition diminished as several members slipped away, suddenly remembering urgent assignments elsewhere. "You've got serious dirt on the Malfoys, haven't you?" Ron asked ITT gleefully once Draco was gone. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams family has serious dirt on most old wizarding families, often literally, as we collect soil samples from ancestral grounds for our comprehensive genealogical records. Magical residue in family soil can reveal secrets that parchment records conveniently omit. The genealogical discussions continued throughout the day, taking on a more structured format when Professor Binns, in an unprecedented show of interest in non-goblin-related history, offered his classroom for a formal presentation on Interfamily Magical Connections, the Adams Perspective on Wizarding Genealogy. By evening, even Professor McGonagall had been drawn into the research, bringing her own family records to compare with ITT's encyclopedic knowledge. Whistle chirp pop, the McGonagall line has fascinating intersections with the Scottish branch of the Addams family. Your great-great-aunt Athena attended our summer solstice revels in 1891, her transfiguration techniques made quite an impression. Several family portraits still transform into tartan patterns when startled. McGonagall looked both surprised and intrigued. Aunt Athena's journals mentioned an unconventional gathering that summer, but the details were conspicuously vague. Chirp whistle pop, understandably so. The ministry had recently implemented restrictions on cross-species transfiguration experiments. The Adams-McGonagall collaborative research operated in a legal gray area, technically compliant but spiritually adventurous. As Harry watched the normally stern professor lean forward with genuine interest, he realized that ITT had accomplished something remarkable, bridging gaps not just between students but between generations, houses, and even between British and American magical traditions. Later that night, as they sat in the Gryffindor common room, Harry voiced this observation. "You've changed Hogwarts," he said to ITT. "In just a couple of weeks, you've broken down barriers that have been in place for centuries." Chirp whistle pop, the Adams effect in action. We specialize in disrupting calcified systems through strategic weirdness. When confronted with something that defies all conventional categories, people must either expand their thinking or retreat into even more rigid rejection. Those who choose expansion discover how arbitrary their previous limitations were. "But it won't last after you're gone," Harry said, a note of sadness creeping into his voice. Whistle chirp pop, catalytic change doesn't require permanent presence, Cousin Harry. The Addams family has influenced magical communities worldwide through brief but memorable interventions. The seed of taxonomic flexibility has been planted at Hogwarts. I suspect it will grow in interesting ways long after my departure. Harry wasn't entirely convinced, but he had to admit that something fundamental seemed to have shifted in the school. The house tables remained mixed during meals, study groups continued to form across traditional boundaries, and even Snape had been spotted having a civil conversation with a Gryffindor 7th year about potential career paths in experimental potions. "Perhaps we should formalize some of these changes," Hermione suggested, joining their conversation with a stack of notes. "I've been thinking about proposing an official interhouse study program based on ITT's model." Chirp whistle pop, excellent initiative. The Addams family believes firmly in institutionalizing chaos. It's how we've maintained our unique culture for generations. Structure and disruption can coexist quite harmoniously with the right framework. The conversation shifted to specific proposals for continuing ITT's legacy at Hogwarts after departure, but Harry found his mind wandering to a more personal concern, his own impending separation from this unexpected family connection that had come to mean so much in such a short time. The next morning brought yet another surprise, a letter for Harry carried by an enormous raven similar to the one ITT had received correspondence from before. The envelope was thick black parchment sealed with dark red wax bearing the now familiar A insignia. Chirp whistle pop, ah. "The family has responded to my reports about you." "How exciting." Harry broke the seal nervously, half expecting something bizarre to jump out. Instead, he found several sheets of elegant black parchment covered in various types of handwriting, all addressed to him. "Dearest Cousin Harry, ITT's letters have filled us with delightful pride regarding your tournament exploits and budding appreciation for the macabre potential of magical education. Your underwater rescue mission sounds positively perilous. Grandmama hasn't been so enthused about a relative's brushes with death since Cousin Crimp's unfortunate experiment with self-transfiguration and electric eels. The family has voted unanimously, with only 3 dissenting howls from the East Wing attic, to formally reinstate the Potter-Adams connection in our grand family tapestry. Your section has been rewoven with golden threads that occasionally spark when the ancestral spirits are particularly restless. We've enclosed an official invitation to visit the Addams mansion this summer. The guest crypt has been aired out, and the bed sheets changed after last month's unfortunate spontaneous combustion incident. Pugsley has promised to deactivate at least 60% of his tripwires and man-traps during your stay, a significant concession he rarely makes even for blood relatives. Do consider accepting our invitation. Family reunions are so much more entertaining with fresh perspectives on mortality and magical education. With macabre affection, Morticia and Gomez Addams. This was followed by several additional notes. Boy who lived, impressed by survival statistics. Have developed new explosive compound to test your reflexes when you visit. Bring fireproof robes. Uncle Fester. Dear Cousin Harry, I've prepared a special welcome guillotine for your visit. Don't worry, the blade stops exactly 1/8 inch from the neck. Usually. Sincerely, Wednesday Addams. P.S. Do you know any British headless ghosts? I'm collecting accounts for my school project on comparative post-decapitation manifestations. Harry Potter, ITT reports your potions professor has interesting preservation techniques. Would appreciate samples of his work for my collection. Will exchange family recipes for pain-enhancing brews. Grandmama Cousin Harry. Stop mansion preparing for visit. Stop lurch creating special bone-strengthening smoothies for your arrival. Stop disregard any screaming from the luggage. Stop it's just thing expressing excitement. Stop. Pugsley Addams. Harry looked up from the letters, feeling oddly touched. They want me to visit. Chirp whistle pop, of course. The family has been fascinated by the Potter branch since your parents' visit. Your survival of the killing curse caused particular excitement. The Addams family prizes resilience against fatal circumstances above almost all other traits. They sound. Harry searched for an appropriate word. Whistle chirp pop, embracing. Enthusiastic. Moderately homicidal but in a loving way. All of that, Harry agreed with a laugh. I've never had family actually want me to visit before. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams concept of family transcends conventional notions of normalcy, blood purity, or taxonomic classification. We collect relatives like others collect curiosities, each unique addition enhances the gloriously chaotic tapestry of our collective identity. Harry carefully folded the letters and tucked them into his robes. I'll need to ask Dumbledore if it's possible for me to visit America. Whistle chirp pop, a mere logistical detail. The family can arrange transportation through our private network if conventional methods prove bureaucratically challenging. The Addams-Potter connection supersedes ordinary international travel restrictions. The idea of actually visiting the Addams mansion was both thrilling and terrifying. From ITT's casual references to swamp creatures, sentient architecture, and recreational death traps, Harry gathered it would be an experience unlike anything he'd encountered, even by wizarding standards. As breakfast continued, the usual morning owl post arrived, bringing with it the Daily Prophet. Harry was surprised to see no mention of ITT or the Addams family on the front page, a welcome change after weeks of sensationalist coverage. I guess Rita Skeeter's taking a break from her campaign against us, he commented. Chirp whistle pop, or perhaps she's found the limits of antagonizing a family with 17 generations of experience in creative problem solving. The Addams approach to persistent adversaries typically involves either dramatic reconciliation or spectacular object lessons. Harry was about to ask which approach they'd taken with Rita when Professor McGonagall approached their table, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Mr. ITT, she said, I've received a rather unusual request from the Department of International Magical Cooperation. It seems that your presence at Hogwarts has sparked interest in establishing a formal exchange program between British and American magical schools. Chirp whistle pop, how wonderful. Cross-cultural magical education has been an Addams family advocacy point for centuries. Great-grandfather Balthazar campaigned extensively for international magical exchange before his unfortunate disappearance during the 1867 International Confederation of Wizards Summit. McGonagall nodded. Yes, well, the ministry is suggesting a pilot program beginning next academic year, with students from Ilvermorny visiting Hogwarts and vice versa. They've asked if you would serve as an honorary advisor to the program, providing consultation on cultural integration techniques. Whistle chirp pop, I would be delighted. The Addams family has extensive experience bridging seemingly incompatible magical traditions. Our annual Summoning the Ancestors dinner party regularly hosts spirits from 17 different magical cultures, only 3 exorcisms required in the last decade. Excellent, McGonagall said, though she looked slightly concerned by the exorcism reference. I'll inform the Ministry of your acceptance. They've suggested quarterly visits to Hogwarts would be sufficient for consultation purposes. Harry felt a surge of excitement. You'd be coming back regularly? Chirp whistle pop, it appears so. The Addams Hogwarts connection has developed more institutional potential than anticipated. Cultural exchange, taxonomic diversity education, interhouse cooperation, all natural extensions of the Addams philosophical approach to magical society. After McGonagall departed, Harry turned to ITT with a grin. You planned this all along, didn't you? Whistle chirp pop, planned is such a deliberate word. The Addams approach to social change is more opportunistically chaotic. We create conditions for delightful disruption, then nurture whatever unexpected consequences emerge. The exchange program is a particularly promising outgrowth. This means you'll be back regularly even after you leave tomorrow, Harry said, relief evident in his voice. Chirp whistle pop, the Addams-Potter connection has been formally re-established on multiple levels, familial, institutional, and cultural. Distance is merely a logistical detail when proper ancestral bonds have been acknowledged. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity as students learned of ITT's impending departure. The ITT Appreciation Society organized an impromptu farewell gathering in the Great Hall that evening, which quickly evolved into a school-wide event when Dumbledore officially sanctioned it and arranged for refreshments. Even Malfoy's anti-ITT coalition had lost momentum in the face of overwhelming school-wide appreciation for the Harry visitor. Draco himself maintained a sullen distance but had stopped actively campaigning against ITT's influence. Whistle chirp pop, young Malfoy will come around eventually. The Addams family has centuries of experience with reluctant relatives who initially resist our particular brand of familial embrace. His dormant Addams connections will assert themselves in time, perhaps through unexpected hair growth or a sudden appreciation for carnivorous houseplants. The farewell celebration featured performances inspired by ITT's musical demonstrations during the Yule Ball. The Weird Sisters lead singer, who had remained at Hogwarts to work on new material, debuted a composition called Harry Situation that incorporated elements of ITT's screaming sorrow pipe style, performed on a modified magical saxophone. Several professors contributed to the festivities as well. Flitwick orchestrated a spectacular charm display in which tiny bowler hats danced through the air in complex patterns. McGonagall transfigured one of the house tables into a figure that resembled ITT, which bowed elegantly to the crowd. Even Snape made a brief appearance, presenting ITT with a small vial of what he described as an experimental variant incorporating your suggested stabilization technique, before retreating to his dungeons. Chirp whistle pop, academic recognition from Severus Snape. A rare honor indeed. The vial contains a prototype sentiment enhancement solution, designed to increase emotional expressiveness. I suspect he created it specifically to address his own repressed nature, though he'd never admit such therapeutic intent. As the evening progressed, Harry found himself growing increasingly reflective. The past weeks with ITT had transformed not just Hogwarts but his own sense of identity and belonging. For the first time in his life, he'd experienced family as a positive force, accepting, supportive, and appreciative of his uniqueness rather than threatened by it. Eventually, as the celebration began to wind down, ITT approached Harry. Chirp whistle pop, a moment alone, perhaps. The Addams family has certain farewell traditions that are best conducted without an audience. They walked out onto the grounds, the February night cold but clear, stars brilliant overhead. They stopped by the edge of the lake, its surface reflecting the castle lights like a dark mirror. Chirp whistle pop, when an Addams bids temporary farewell to family, we traditionally exchange tokens that contain essence of self. It creates a metaphysical connection that transcends physical separation. ITT reached into the depths of hair and produced a small object that gleamed silver in the moonlight, a tiny pair of scissors, intricately crafted with handles shaped like miniature versions of ITT. Whistle chirp pop, these have been in the Addams family for 7 generations. They're enchanted to cut only what truly needs cutting, physical or metaphorical. In times of confusion or entanglement, they provide clarity that ordinary tools cannot. Harry accepted the scissors with a sense of reverence. I can't take something so valuable. Chirp whistle pop, value increases through appropriate transfer, Cousin Harry. These belong with you now, the Potter branch of the family deserves its own Addams heirloom. Besides, they contain a strand of my hair permanently embedded in the silver. Should you ever face danger beyond your resources, shear the hair with focused intent, and I will know immediately. Harry carefully tucked the scissors into his pocket. Thank you. I don't have anything ancient or magical to give you in return. Whistle chirp pop, but you do. The Addams tradition merely requires essence of self, a physical token containing magical resonance. Understanding dawned on Harry. You want some of my hair? Chirp whistle pop, precisely. The Addams family maintains connections through biological material exchange. A few strands of your hair will allow me to add you properly to the family tapestry and create a permanent sympathetic link. Harry didn't hesitate. He reached up and plucked several strands from his perpetually messy head, holding them out to ITT. Whistle chirp pop, perfect. Potter hair has distinctive magical properties, likely connected to your family's transfiguration affinity. These will integrate beautifully into the ancestral collection. ITT carefully wound Harry's hair around what appeared to be a tiny golden spool that vanished back into the mass of amber tresses. There's something I've been wondering, Harry said hesitantly. With everything that's happened, Voldemort, the tournament, all of it, do you think my parents would be proud of how I'm handling things? ITT was silent for a moment, the hair rippling slightly in what Harry had come to recognize as a sign of deep thought. Chirp whistle pop, when your parents visited the Addams mansion, they participated in our traditional family truth ritual, a ceremony involving ancestral spirits, truth serum, and uncomfortably direct questioning. During this, your father was asked what legacy he hoped to leave his children. His answer was unexpected even by Addams standards. What did he say? Harry asked softly. Whistle chirp pop, he said, I hope to give my children the courage to be authentically themselves, even when the world demands conformity. Your mother then added, and the wisdom to know that power means nothing without purpose, and that love is the only purpose worth dying for. Harry felt his throat tighten. Whistle chirp pop, by those measures, Cousin Harry, your parents would be extraordinarily proud. You have faced unprecedented challenges with authentic courage, never compromising your core values despite overwhelming pressure. You have wielded significant power with remarkable restraint, always in service of protecting others rather than elevating yourself. ITT's translation orb seemed to soften its tone somehow. Whistle chirp pop, the Addams family measures worth differently than most. We value resilience over perfection, authenticity over conformity, and the courage to embrace the strange and macabre aspects of existence rather than denying them. By both Potter and Addams standards, you have exceeded all reasonable expectations. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the dark water. Whistle chirp pop, family transcends separation, Cousin Harry. The connection we've re-established exists independently of physical presence. The Addams-Potter line continues through you, taxonomically ambiguous, magically unique, gloriously resistant to conventional categorization. Harry smiled. Thank you for coming to the Yule Ball. It turned out to be so much more than I expected. Whistle chirp pop, the best family reunions always are. Unexpected developments, near-death experiences, bureaucratic entanglements, and the occasional interdimensional incident, all essential components of a proper Addams gathering. As they walked back to the castle, Harry felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since arriving at Hogwarts for his 4th year. Whatever the final task might bring, whatever Voldemort might be planning, he now carried something new, the knowledge that his unique experiences and abilities weren't abnormalities to be hidden but family traits to be embraced. The next morning dawned clear and bright. ITT's departure was scheduled for noon, using the same mysterious, family crypt network that had facilitated arrival. A large crowd had gathered in the entrance hall to bid farewell, including professors, students from all houses, and even several ghosts who had become particularly attached to ITT. Whistle chirp pop, departure ceremonies are traditionally melancholy, but the Addams family prefers to treat them as transitions rather than endings. Besides, with the exchange program formalized, I'll be returning quarterly for consultation visits. Dumbledore stepped forward, eyes twinkling above his half-moon spectacles. Hogwarts extends its deepest gratitude for your visit, Mr. ITT. You have provided our community with fresh perspective on magical education, taxonomy, and inter-house cooperation. The impact of your brief residence will be felt for generations to come. Chirp whistle pop, most kind, Headmaster. The Addams family considers educational disruption a sacred duty. Magical institutions benefit from occasional taxonomic challenges to prevent calcification of thinking. Hogwarts has proven remarkably adaptable, a promising sign for its continued evolution. The goodbyes continued with various professors and students stepping forward to express appreciation. Flitwick presented ITT with a tiny charmed bowler hat that would automatically resize to fit any wearer. McGonagall offered a formal certificate establishing ITT as an honorary consultant to Transfiguration Studies. Even Hagrid came forward with a tearful farewell, presenting what appeared to be a small carnivorous plant in a pot. "Bred it myself," Hagrid sniffled. "Cross between venomous tentacula and a flutterby bush. Thought it might remind ya of home." Chirp whistle pop, a perfect gift. The Addams family greenhouse will welcome this delightful addition. Cousin Morticia will be particularly thrilled, she's been experimenting with sentient plant-animal hybrids for her upcoming herbological monograph. Finally, the moment of departure arrived. ITT turned to Harry one last time. "Chirp whistle pop, remember, Cousin Harry, the scissors connect us regardless of distance. And the summer invitation stands. The family is already preparing for your visit with appropriate levels of excitement and mild structural reinforcement of the guest wing." Harry smiled. "I'll be there if Dumbledore allows it." Whistle chirp pop, excellent. Oh, and one final gift for Hogwarts as a whole. ITT produced a small, ornate box from within the hair and presented it to Dumbledore. "Chirp whistle pop, a traditional Addams portrait for your collection. Great-great-grandfather Alphonse Addams, the only known wizard to successfully transfigure himself into 17 different taxonomic categories simultaneously. The portrait occasionally offers unsolicited advice on transcending magical limitations, but only to those it deems sufficiently, taxonomically flexible." Dumbledore accepted the gift with obvious delight. "A most generous contribution to our ancestral gallery. I shall hang it in a prominent location where students can benefit from its unique perspective." With final farewells complete, ITT moved to the center of the entrance hall where a curious crack had begun forming in the stone floor, similar to the one that had heralded arrival. The crack widened, emitting the now familiar scent of ozone, cinnamon, and decay. "Chirp whistle pop, until we meet again, Cousin Harry. Remember, what others call strange, the Addams family calls inheritance. Embrace your taxonomic ambiguity, it's your greatest strength." With a final cheerful wave, ITT stepped into the widening crack, which seemed to swallow the mass of hair whole before sealing itself with a sound like distant laughter. The translation orb hovered for a moment longer, emitted one final pop, and then winked out of existence. A silence fell over the entrance hall as everyone stared at the spot where ITT had vanished. Then, gradually, conversation resumed as students began discussing their favorite ITT moments and the changes that had come to Hogwarts during the brief but impactful visit. "It's weird," Ron said as they headed to lunch. "The castle feels different somehow, even though everything looks the same." "That's the ITT effect," Hermione said thoughtfully. It's like having a reference point for extreme difference makes all our usual divisions seem smaller by comparison. Harry nodded, his hand unconsciously touching the pocket where the tiny silver scissors rested. ITT showed us that being unclassifiable isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. Life at Hogwarts gradually returned to a version of normal over the following weeks, though normal had been permanently redefined by ITT's visit. The inter-house study groups continued, the mixed seating at meals became standard practice, and the ITT Appreciation Society evolved into a more formal club dedicated to taxonomic diversity in magical education. Preparation for the third task occupied much of Harry's time, but he found himself approaching the challenge with a new perspective. Rather than feeling isolated by his unique situation as an underage champion, he now recognized it as part of a larger pattern of taxonomic ambiguity that ran through his family history. The exchange program with Ilvermorny moved forward with surprising speed, with the ministry announcing that the first American exchange students would arrive the following September. Rumors circulated that one of them might be an Adams, though Harry suspected this was wishful thinking on the part of the ITT fan club. 2 months after ITT's departure, as Harry was studying in the library, a familiar raven swooped through an open window and dropped a thick black envelope on his book. The Adams seal glowed faintly in the library lamplight. Inside was a moving wizarding photograph showing the Adams family mansion, an enormous Gothic structure that seemed architecturally impossible, with towers leaning at physically improbable angles and windows that appeared to occasionally blink. In the foreground stood the assembled Adams clan, a collection of figures that made ITT seem positively conventional by comparison. Harry recognized Gomez and Morticia from his parents' old photograph, the gaunt, pale woman and the enthusiastic man with the pinstriped suit and wild eyes. Beside them stood a bald man with sunken eyes who appeared to be generating electricity between his fingertips, 2 solemn children with unnaturally pale skin, and a hunched figure that might have been a butler or possibly a reanimated corpse. And there in the center, slightly taller than Harry remembered, stood Cousin Itt, bowler hat perched jauntily atop the mass of hair. Itt held what appeared to be a miniature model of Hogwarts Castle, gesturing animatedly to the family while the tiny castle's windows lit up in sequence. A note accompanied the photograph, written in elegant, spidery handwriting, "Dearest Cousin Harry, the family eagerly anticipates your summer visit. ITT's stories of your underwater heroics and taxonomic uniqueness have captivated everyone. Wednesday has already prepared 7 different welcome scenarios, each more potentially lethal than the last, her way of showing genuine affection. Your room in the East Wing has been specially prepared with traditional Potter Adams accommodations, including your father's favorite self-rearranging bookcase and your mother's experimental protective charms that occasionally manifest as ghostly deer. Enclosed is a portkey disguised as an ordinary quill. Simply write the words, 'Family is everything,' with it when you're ready to visit, and it will transport you directly to the mansion's receiving crypt. Dumbledore has already approved your 2-week visit in July. We maintain certain leverages with educational administrators worldwide that ensure cooperation in family matters. Until then, embrace your marvelous taxonomic ambiguity. What ordinary wizards consider strange, the Addams family recognizes as power." With macabre affection, the Addams family. Harry smiled as he tucked the letter and photograph carefully into his robes. When he'd desperately invited a distant cousin to the Yule ball, he'd never imagined it would lead to discovering a branch of family that actually celebrated the very differences that had always made him feel isolated. He fingered the tiny silver scissors in his pocket, feeling the connection they represented. Whatever the final task might bring, whatever challenges lay ahead in the fight against Voldemort, he now carried something precious, the knowledge that being unclassifiable wasn't a weakness but a strength, a family trait passed down through generations of Potters and Addamses who refused to be limited by conventional magical boundaries. Family, as ITT had said repeatedly, was everything. And Harry's family had just become considerably more interesting. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.